Today I am taking over the worst team in all of baseball for 10 seasons because after the miserable year the Chicago White Sox had, we all know they need it. In this video, I'm going to be rebuilding this team as realistically as possible, and being honest with you, I really don't know how long that's gonna take because this roster I found on the vault is not doing them any favors. It also doesn't help them that they just traded their star player Garrett Crochet to the Red Sox, and to be fair, while they did get some solid prospects in return in Braden Montgomery and Kyle T, it still really sucks to lose a star. Speaking of our prospects though, if anything's gonna make this rebuild somewhat manageable, it is our farm system, and last I checked, Fangraphs had it ranked number 4 in baseball. I am very excited to see guys like Colson Montgomery and Nola Schultz down the road, but of course, they are still the future, and right now, this team is a mess. I have seen a lot of very bad lineups in MLB The Show, and honestly, this one probably takes the cake as the worst one yet, but after seeing our rotation, I am expecting 120 losses. If things already weren't bad enough, we're going up against a playoff team on opening day, and that also means facing their Cy Young level ace, Tariq Skubal. I have zero doubt he's gonna eat us alive, because right now, our best offensive player is 75 overall, and there's no way we actually got a base hit. Now we can breathe much easier, knowing a perfect game is not on the table as we get 2 on, which will bring up Luis Robert Jr. Before any of you say I'm pronouncing his name wrong, this is exactly how the man himself pronounces his own name on the team site, but regardless, after a down year, he has to return to all-star form. We're trying very hard to waste this chance, and here's Andrew Vaughn, who's kind of been disappointing as the former number 3 overall pick, and he pops up. It really feels like Chicago is where good prospects go to die, as even a player like Yoan Moncada didn't live up to the hype. That narrative could also continue with Corey Lee, who not long ago was the Astros' number 1 prospect, but so far with Chicago, his development has not gone anywhere. Early on in this game, it seems Mike Clevenger is actually dealing, and while our offense has certainly not been explosive, we're at least putting the ball in play. Obviously though, Tariq Skubal's gonna lock in, and it feels like only a matter of time before the Tigers bury us, but we keep finding ways to sneak these through the infield. So far in this game, we have done a great job of staying disciplined and working counts, and now it seems it's all gonna pay off as Andrew Vaughn sneaks this one through and Danny Mendick scores the first run of our season. We just got so lucky with 3 low contact base hits in a row, but now Colt Keith mashes this into right field, and just like that, our lead is gone. That is exactly what we all expected in this game, and now 2 at-bats later, Kerry Carpenter drives this deep for their second homer of the inning. Now that they have the lead, it seems the White Sox have fallen apart, and because this is going to be a pretty long video, I'll save you the time. We got destroyed. To start the year, we are 0-5, but we have a chance to beat the Atlanta Braves, but they're only down by 1 with loaded bases. However, that was a very nice strikeout for Clevenger, who puts them away, but he ran out of stamina, so we have to count on our bullpen, and that is not going to work out well for us at all. Marcell Ozuna immediately goes Oppo Taco to tie the game, and we're going to be very lucky if they don't make it worse as Matt Olson belts this one into left field, going all the way back to the wall, and thankfully is foul. That was the best break we could have possibly gotten, but it didn't take long for our bullpen to officially blow it, as in a blink of an eye, we have given up 6 unanswered runs. So far, I cannot name a single good thing to say about this team, as not only do we start our season getting swept by 2 teams in a row, but it's about to be 3. Before we get there though, we have to talk about this first draft class because this set of players could define the entire rebuild. We have the number 5 overall pick in this draft, but if things keep going as bad as they have, that could be even higher next year. As I always do in these drafts, I'm going to start out by scouting international starting pitchers, and with our second scout, I'm going to discover them. That only leaves 1 more scout to focus on a position player, and as always, I want a guy who could become a game-changing hitter, and maybe John Pope is that guy. It's a bit of a risk considering he's the number 4 player in the class, but if he does fall, he could be a great selection, because while our farm does have 2 high upside shortstops, we don't have anything at third base. 3 series into the year, we are still looking for our first win of the season, and the Kansas City Royals just took the lead, so we're trying very hard to drop to 0-10 on the year, but maybe there's some hope as Andrew Vaughn doubles in the 7th. That is a very rare extra base hit for this team, but unfortunately, we cannot capitalize, so we get swept for the 3rd time of the year, and our schedule for the rest of the month is looking brutal. With the way we're playing, my attention is entirely on scouting, and we found the number 1 player in the entire class, which might seem very good, except for the fact that we're picking at number 5. I think the one good thing about being as bad as we are is we have needs at pretty much every single position, position, which does make scouting a little easier. But so far, this looks like a very solid class for third baseman, and Dante Rogers has power that I would kill for. Because MLB The Show makes so many great pitchers, I think I'm always going to prioritize a good position player, and I think Doug Hills is who I'm going to scout next week because his contact looks very good. We are 0-15 to start the year, while the Royals and the Tigers look amazing. So normally in a rebuild like this, my goal in season 1 is to find guys to build around, but I'm starting to think this roster doesn't have anybody worth keeping, as Moncada cannot even make an easy play at third. I remember when Moncada was baseball's #1 prospect, but he never really lived up to the hype, and with the way he's played so far, I do not expect that to change as Cincinnati takes the lead. Without fail, our bullpen always finds a different way to let us down, as we almost hit a home run here but fly out at the track. So even though this is one of the closer games we've played this season, we are not going to win any games until our offense plays better. I did not think it was possible to take this many L's coming out of the gate, but to be fair, we are facing nothing but playoff teams. Maybe once we get past this very tough stretch of schedule, things will get a little bit easier and we'll start to see players that we want to keep on the team. And down 2 against Philadelphia, Nicky Lopez just doubled, which sends Slater home, but he is thrown out. That play perfectly sums up the season, as even when things go right, they go wrong. So once again, our offense got shut out, which is exactly why I wanted to scout someone like Dante Rogers. He is definitely a project player and might be a career DH because of that scary bad defense, but with raw power that looks like that, it might not matter. He is certainly an intriguing option, but of course, I want to keep looking, starting with a player who's kind of the opposite of him in Doug Hills. Unlike Dante Rogers, he does not have very good power at all, but is very well balanced in pretty much every other area, and if I had to choose between the two right now, I think I would choose Doug. We've also been scouting pitching for the last 3 weeks, and while our discovery scouts have done their job uncovering guys like Ray Morales and Diego Blanco, we also might have discovered a major gem in Mauricio Cordova. He is currently the #9 overall player in the entire class with guaranteed high potential and walks per 9, and if we can't find a better option at 5, he might be the best pick available. You can never have too many arms, but considering that 3 of the top 4 guys in our farm system are pitchers, it would be really nice to grab a true masher. One of those pitchers is 23-year-old Drew Thorpe, who is at the MLB level, and while it may not mean much, he has been the best arm on a very bad staff. If he somehow wins Rookie of the Year though, we can get an extra draft pick, which would be huge. But if that's gonna happen, he needs to start getting some wins, starting with one against Philadelphia. He's in a bit of trouble early on with runners at the corners, but thankfully gets out of it. However, the bigger problem is that I do not trust our offense. Luis Robert Jr. was dubbed the future of this team after making the All-Star game last season, but now he's fallen off a cliff. And going down the list, he is just one guy who is playing way under expectation. Without a doubt, this is the worst offense I think I've ever seen, but finally in the 3rd inning, we get something going as Corey Lee doubles the other way, but for whatever reason, he is stretching this into a triple, which is not gonna happen. Auto base running is turned on, so that was Corey Lee's decision, so we keep getting buried by bad decisions, but at least for now, Drew Thorpe is keeping us in this game. We do have a base runner in the 4th inning, and we're lucky that Mendick hit that as hard as he did because it's not a double play, so we have another chance as they hit Rober to bring up Andrew Vaughn, who can really mash lefties. I think this might be the best our offense has looked all year, but we still can't score, and this could be bad because Drew Thorpe's running out of stamina. We have seen our bullpen throw away too many close games, so we need Thorpe to get out of this one, and that is exactly what he does with a double play. He is giving us a great opportunity to win our first game of the entire season, but if we're gonna capitalize, we need to score a run as we hit it right back to Suarez. We have wasted another promising inning as Thorpe gives up a single, and I'm a bit nervous with him going up against Bryce Harper, who does single to put 2 runners on. There are 2 on with 2 away, but he strikes out Kyle Schwarber, and after another scoreless inning, we are still tied at 0 in the 8th. Our offense started out looking very good, but they only have 4 hits on the game, and now that Thorpe is out, because the game is tied, he won't even get credited if we do win. We are on our way to wasting a great performance from our rookie pitcher, but not so fast. Danny Mendick goes the other way, and that is gone. They put their elite closer, Jose Alvarado, in the game, but it did not matter as Danny makes great contact, and that run could finally secure us our first win, but here's Bryce Harper, who barely keeps it in the yard. With this bullpen, it is never over till the final out as Anderson just missed his spot, and Kyle Schwarber is able to mash a double off the wall. So I'm starting to get very nervous, but there's a strikeout. So we are now 1 out away as this goes straight to Moncada. The throw to first will secure us a victory. victory. That was not pretty at all, but we have finally won a baseball game, as a gem from Drew Thorpe sparks a shutout against the Philadelphia Phillies, and Danny Mendick's 9th inning home run sealed the victory. It took 22 games, but we are no longer winless, and we may have found a quality building block in Drew Thorpe. I know that's not exactly world-breaking, but remember that not long ago, we were just trying to find a single positive, and on the scouting side of things, Doug Hills looks exactly like what we thought he was gonna be. I will not complain if he ends up being our best option at 5 overall, but I do want to look at some other players like power-hitting catcher Damon Kelso, because even though contact is a very important skill, raw power is just too rare to pass up. We are also done scouting pretty much every single international pitcher we possibly can, and I'm very happy with what I'm seeing, so we are moving on to the Western region. We have finally made it through the month of April, where we sit at 3-28, and as I mentioned before, there is not a lot to go on, as Luis Rober may be our most dynamic offensive player, even though he's hitting 206. The good news for this team, though, is we're not really locked up in many bad long-term contracts, except for one, and this deal with Andrew Benintendi really hurts because he might be our worst player so far. On the pitching side of things, though, rookie Drew Thorpe has been a very nice surprise, putting together an ERA under 3 and a WHIP under 1.2, but of course, immediately after him, this rotation falls off a cliff, and it's really the same story with the bullpen. The sooner we get to the draft, the sooner we can get excited about this team, especially because I might have found my favorite player so far in Damon Kelso. I am very excited because a player with this type of power does not come around very often, and for a position player, he's probably our best option because John Pope is probably not going to be there at 5, and I really don't like Sid Walsh's projections. If we can't beat the Nationals at least once, I might just sim to the draft, and even though we're down 2, we have the bases loaded, but Andrew Vaughn chokes it away. I really fear that is the best opportunity we're going to get, especially this late in the game, as we're finally facing a non-playoff team, but they win game 1. I don't expect us to win the series, but at least win a single game, and maybe we can clutch up in game 3 to get it done. We just saw Andrew Vaughn waste an opportunity away, but fortunately for us, he does hit lefties very well, as this one drops to score the tying run. There have not been many clutch moments so far this year, but suddenly with 2 on, we can walk it off. We have seen Danny deliver in clutch spots, but he draws a walk, and if we get another one of those, or an easy single, we win, but how about a sacrifice fly as Sosa's jumping up and down, and that is certainly deep enough to earn the White Sox a walk-off victory. Chicago earns a signature win and avoids the sweep, and honestly, those type of moments are really the best this team is going to give us this season, so we may as well embrace them and just keep focusing on scouting. Rather than focusing on first-round prospects, I'm going to start looking for some gems later in the draft, and I think one of them could be JJ Romero, because this is very good contact for a player ranked 100th on our board. We could also use as many guaranteed high potential guys as we could get to fill out our farm system, and as you can see, there's a lot at left field. I think the rest of this season is about identifying and developing the core of the future for this rebuild, and I'm really hoping that one of those players can be Luis Rober Jr. As I mentioned, he has fallen off so much after making the All-Star game in 2023, so I'm really hoping this is a sign of a turnaround, because remember that he does have a potential and is under contract for the next 4 seasons, so if he can bounce back and regain his star form, we are going to have a crazy good building block for the future. We're beating Toronto 2-0 on the back of a Thorpe shutout, and of course, he's the guy I want to build this team around as Vlad Guerrero threw his bat. He has been on fire lately as he goes 8 scoreless innings, and we shut out the Blue Jays, and for the second time in 2 weeks, we have a chance to win the series, which is exactly what we do. Obviously, we are still a terrible team, but on the bright side, we aren't winless anymore, and it feels like a couple players are starting to find their groove, including Luis Rober Jr., who's on a hot streak. He is the highest potential player on our team, so his development's very important, but it would also be very nice to see some growth from an A potential player in Andrew Vaughn, who so far is playing terribly, and that's definitely hurting him, as checking out his attributes, he is regressing. On a more positive side though, Drew Thorpe as a rookie has been everything that we could have ever hoped for, and the 23-year-old is already up to 76 overall, looking to grow even more. Last week in scouting, we took a look at Willie Stevens, and I am excited to say he might just be one of my top targets, as the power-hitting switch hitter is 37th on my board. He is the exact type of player we need on this offense, but I'm going to keep looking at more left fielders, starting with this guy who's a completely different player than Stevens with contact and good athleticism. Now in our next game, we are tied in extras against the Cubs, but here comes Rafael Ortega Ortega with a huge double into the gap, so we could be on our way to securing another signature victory, but just to make sure, let's score another run. Winning the Crosstown Classic would be a huge deal, but I'm a little nervous facing new Cub Kyle Tucker, but there we go. Rob Marinaccio puts him away to secure our victory, and finally, at the start of June, we have reached double-digit wins. Aside from Rob Marinaccio, our bullpen has been a huge problem this year, but our discovery scout from the Central region might have just found our closer of the future. Obviously, I need to scout him a little bit more, but right now he comes in as the number 3 player on the board, and if he's as good as he looks, I'm gonna do everything I can to get him, just to give our organization another young arm. A few more weeks of scouting later, I found a very good shortstop who we could take in the second round in Emmanuel Garner, and even though we are loaded at that spot, I'm still very interested, because even though we already have Colson Montgomery and Jacob Gonzalez, my strategy in this draft is to simply take the best players available. After a historically bad start to the season, we've been a lot better recently, as we have 20 wins at the start of July, and we're looking for one more against Colorado as Gavin Sheets goes deep. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I tend to get Gavin Sheets in my franchises, so this feels great, and even though there's no doubt he's a bust in real life, and he's only 64 overall in this game, he's having a pretty good season so far, and because he has B potential, he could turn his career around. He just secured us a series win against Colorado, and it's very encouraging to see Luis Rober Jr.'s resurgence continue. The rest of the offense has been kind of hit or miss, with some players like Rafael Ortega playing really well, but some of our highest potential players like Yohan Moncada, Corey Lee, and Andrew Vaughn are all still struggling. However, in the rotation, Drew Thorpe is still cooking, along with Mike Soroka, who's another interesting player I haven't even talked about yet, who has 1 year left on his deal. If his performance continues to improve, we could possibly get something for him in a trade, and while it definitely wouldn't be a good return, getting a C potential prospect is better than nothing. We are entering our final week of scouting before the draft, and last week I scouted Ben Clemente, who looks to be everything we could ever want. As a discovery player, he's very likely to fall in the draft, so unless someone pulls the trigger earlier than expected, I'm gonna do everything I can to get him to Chicago. I cannot express how excited I am for this MLB draft, as we have solid options for pick number 5, along with many solid prospects further down the board. John Pope has been my favorite player in the draft from the first week we scouted him, but I think the harsh reality is he's not going to be available at number 5 overall, so I'm fully prepared to take my second favorite player, catcher Damon Kelso. This guy is an absolute monster and will come in day 1 with elite power along with solid defense, so unless Pope falls to us, I'm happy to make him the first draft pick of the rebuild, but if he does get selected for whatever reason, I'm gonna be disappointed, but I still feel confident in Jamal Eichner. MLB The Show generates so many talented pitchers, so I usually try to stay away from them in the first round, but at least for me, Jamal Eichner is very intriguing because he combines a high ceiling with a high floor. Obviously, I'm hoping I don't have to take him, but I happily will if that's what it comes down to. But after that, no matter what happens, I want to take either starting pitcher Mauricio Cordova or Emmanuel Garner with our second pick. Honestly, that is as far as my plan needs to go because we have so many other position player options late in the draft, and no matter who we take, I'm gonna probably feel pretty good, especially because our discovery scouts did a very nice job of identifying pitcher talent, and it's very likely a few of these guys will be available later in the draft. Without further ado, it is time to start our first draft and make the most of 7 selections, but there goes my favorite player. That is unfortunate, but of course, I am not surprised, as we could not have been the only team to see John Pope's excellence, but as you can see, our number 1 target is still on the board, and this is a no-brainer. Damon Kelso is nothing short of a blue-chip player with amazing power, and even though we have a few catching prospects like Edgar Cuero and Kyle Teal, it doesn't matter, this guy's too good to pass on. With our first selection out of the way, it is time to play the waiting game for the second round, but considering how many second-round talents are being taken in the first, there's a good chance that all of my targets come off the board. However, as you can see, all of my favorites are still on the board at pick 24, but maybe I spoke too soon because Emmanuel Garner goes to the Padres. Out of everybody, I was really hoping he would be the guy that would stick it out, but we miss out on the number 14 player on my board, and Mauricio Cordova probably will not last. Sure enough, he would go at the bottom of the first round, so all of my second round options are gone, which honestly is not too unexpected, but because of that, I'm going to be reaching for the next highest ranked player on my board, Willie Stevens, because I really don't want to risk waiting till 67. This is not how I pictured this starting out, but at least we're still still getting a good player, and if we're lucky, JJ Romero or Alex Torres will fall to 67. I am not even gonna wait for it, I'm gonna sim forward, and sure enough, they are both still on the board. So right after getting my 44th ranked prospect, I am cashing in on my 49th as well. Looking at Torres, I'm actually not sure why he's ranked above Craig Crosby, who should be my next target, so just for convenience, I'm gonna go ahead and switch that and hope he falls to 81. Sure enough, both are on the board in round 3, and even though Craig Crosby's a bit of a project, I like the athleticism and the guaranteed high potential, so I'm adding an 18-year-old to the team. So far, we have not taken a single pitcher, which is definitely a luxury for MLB The Show, because at least for me, it seems good position guys are hard to come by, and even though there are 2 more left fielders on the board, I really don't think I can resist Elvis Valenzuela, especially if we can't get an arm later on. Another thing worth noting is closer Ben Clemente is still on the board as the number 3 player in the class, and just like almost any Discovery player, because he's already lasted this long, I have no doubt he can make it to the 6th round. By choosing to draft Elvis Valenzuela, I miss out on Brandon McGrath, who I really liked and has very good power and positional versatility, but at least in round 5, I still have one more position player on the board in Rod Breeding. No matter what round 6 looks like, I am very excited about this draft class, but of course, I am banking on Ben Clemente being available because it's just how this game works. I am going to full send and sim ahead, and sure enough, Clemente is still available, so we end the draft on the best note possible. That draft was really the biggest thing we had to do this season, and considering we've only won 29 games at the break, there's really not much else we can do this season aside from just hoping that our high potential guys continue getting some good development in. I'm also not bringing up any of our ready top prospects this year like Noah Schultz, Colson Montgomery, or Kyle Teal, only because while their numbers have been solid, they haven't been anything special, and I don't want to waste any of their service time this early in the build. At the trade deadline, I'm going to sell on 2 players who I don't feel are a part of our future, starting of course with the guy I mentioned earlier, Mike Soroka. To my surprise, he has held up pretty strong this season with a 3.62 ERA, so I'm going to send him to the San Francisco Giants, who are looking to make a playoff push but need some more depth. Because he's very close to free agency, we're not going to get much from this deal, but one player I'm very interested in is Luis Toribio, who does have C potential, but he's 23 years old and has struggled so far at AAA. We're going to make that 1-for-1 swap, but now for my second trade, Yohan Moncada has come on very hot lately, and as you can see, he has raised his season OPS to 700, and right now, he's on pace to have one of his best seasons ever. White Sox fans are not going to like this, but there's a team right down the road that could use an upgrade at third base, and they are clearly serious about making the playoffs because they traded for Andres Munoz from Seattle, so in return, I want their AAA pitcher, Porter Hodge, who's played very well this season. We desperately need a good bullpen arm, just like they need a third baseman, so this is a fair swap, but now that our team's even worse, I'm definitely not playing the rest of this season. However, before we advance to the offseason, we have to do the most important thing we've done yet, and that is looking at this year's draft class. We are counting on Damon Kelso and the rest of this class to be building blocks for the entire rebuild, but even though I think we nailed this, I'm still very nervous as we go in, and that is a lot of blue. We trusted our scouts, and it really paid off in the end, as we had 5 guys with 90 potential or higher, and the other 2 had 88. Starting at the top, Damon Kelso is no doubt our best player at 74 overall, and with these numbers, he immediately becomes our best catcher. You simply do not see this type of raw power at 18 years old, and combined with his high potential, he is the surefire future of this team. Funny enough, my favorite player in the draft is John Pope, who actually has a lower overall than Kelso, and while he does have 4 higher potential at 92, he's also 21 years old, so I actually think we got the better prospect. At the time, things did not go perfectly because we had to take my 3rd round target, Willie Stevens, in the 2nd, but considering he also comes in with very good raw power with A potential, I cannot complain. In case you were curious, the player that I really wanted in that slot was Emmanuel Gardner, who does come in with 64 overall, so to a degree, we did kinda miss out, but ultimately, I would not have been happy if that led to us missing out on Willie Stevens, who is an absolute machine. After taking Stevens, our scouts were also very high on JJ Romero and Craig Crosby, and it really worked out that they were the top players on my board. Long term, I am concerned with Romero's lack of power as a first baseman, and as with any project, there are concerns about both players' development long term, as Craig Crosby is super raw. Regardless, I am very happy that we got those guys where we did, along with Elvis Valenzuela Valenzuela, who was also very highly regarded by our scouts. And even though he has a long way to go before reaching the show, his walks per 9 and hits per 9 are both very good. In round 5, there was one more position player on my board, and that was Rob Breeding, who actually turned out to be 99 potential. The game likes to create these 99 potential infielders and kind of hide them in the back of draft classes, and usually they are extremely raw hitters. So while many of these guys never actually pan out, I believe in Breeding because he has good contact. Like I said, he was the final position player on my board, so really I was just taking him out of necessity. So I'm very thankful that worked out in our favor as we ended the draft with Ben Clemente, who ended up being a complete diamond in the rough. There's a solid chance he's up at the majors by the end of next season just because of his hits and walks per 9. So he was a very strong ending to what was, at least on paper, the best draft I've ever pulled in MLB The Show. We just built the best farm system in all of Major League Baseball in one single draft, which of course is awesome, but it's still going to be a very long time before we're a good team as we finish with the worst record in all of baseball. Funny enough, we still won 12 more games than the real-life Chicago White Sox, so that should really just speak volume to how bad they are. But while the season did not go well for us, Gavin Sheets emerged as our surprise breakout star, putting up 21 home runs in only 79 games. There is no doubt he earned his spot as a starter with a 932 OPS, as no consistent member of our team had an OPS above 700. Then in the rotation, you already know the story of Drew Thorpe, who was one of the best pitchers in all of baseball, and considering he somehow didn't have a losing record on this Chicago team, he should probably have been Rookie of the Year, but instead he takes home a Gold Glove. After him, the rest of this rotation was complete trash, but to my surprise, our bullpen was actually kind of the opposite. One of the biggest reasons for this is Rob Marinaccio, who does have B potential and improved quite a bit throughout the year, and considering that he has 5 years before he hits free agency, he could be in our bullpen for a very long time. Then there's also our newest addition, Porter Hodge, who we acquired in the trade for Yoan Moncada, and even though he was only on the team for about half the season, he did put together a pretty nice stat line. This season was all about the development of our highest potential players, and just going down the board, you can see that so many players got better and could emerge on the major league team sooner rather than later. Apparently trading for Yoan Moncada worked out for the Cubs because they would go on to win the whole World Series. And how fitting is it that our crosstown rival wins the World Series while we were the worst team in baseball? Because we're so bad, it doesn't make any sense to shell out a bunch of money for free agents because they would never want to come here. Scrolling through free agents though, I just noticed that our 6th round draft pick, Ben Clemente, is in the pool. And looking even further than that, so is our 5th round pick, Rob Breeding, and this is because of a weird glitch that I guess MLB The Show still has not patched. So our first 2 free agent signings were guys we actually drafted, and aside from them, we're kind of just picking through the bargain bins. Free agency is not a big deal, so it's crucial we don't get screwed over by the draft lottery, as we're in place for the number 1 pick, but the Astros jump us. For the first couple seasons, we're gonna rely pretty heavily on the Rule 5 draft just to get our team into slightly better condition, but honestly, there are not as many options at the top as normal, except there's one player I have never seen in here before. Christian Encarnacion has A potential at 25 years old, and even though he's only 64 overall, I really cannot pass him up. Here's our opening day lineup in Season 2, and the key here was to stack the lineup with as many high potential guys as I possibly can, largely because we already know we're going to be pretty bad, so why not get some development for our best prospects? Then in our rotation, we are leading off with 3 B potentials, along with Jose Suarez, who we just signed as a long reliever, and just from that signing alone, I have a lot more faith in this bullpen than I did last year, as Rob Marinaccio leads it. But if we scroll down, we'll see that Porter Hodge, who we traded for last year, is our closer. Even though he just played 27 games last season, he was a huge upgrade, and at the very least, he can buy us some time while we're waiting for prospect Ben Clemente. Speaking of our prospects, in just one season, we have put together the best farm system in all of baseball with 12 top 100 guys, and that list includes 3 guys in the top 11 who we all took in last year's draft. While many of these guys are long-term prospects, I'm expecting some of them to be ready this year, including Colson Montgomery and Kyle Teal, along with starting pitchers Noah Schultz and potentially Hagen Smith. It is time for opening day against the Angels, which we're starting out with a no-doubter into left field, but pulls foul. Luis Robert Jr. nearly had a first pitch home run, but unfortunately, he was inches away from satisfaction as we go 1-2-3. On the bright side, that was some good contact contact. But at least now we get to see Drew Thorpe cook, and that is not exactly what I had in mind. Mike Trout is gonna go deep. We have given up a deep bomb in the first inning of the year, and I really hope that's not a sign of a sophomore slump for Thorpe, as Andrew Vaughn collects our first hit of the year. That inning went a little bit better for us, but we still did not score. But now in the third inning, here's a player that I'm very excited about, and that is Christian Encarnacion, as Mike Trout misses the dive to give him an easy triple. It was definitely a risk taking him in the Rule 5 draft, as he's only 64 overall and did not play at the majors last year, but considering this season is all about development, we can't lose anything by giving him a shot. Luis Robert Jr. drives in our first run of the season, and I thought Sheets hit that better, but at least we are tied up at 1 apiece, at least until the 5th inning, when Christian Encarnacion delivers again. He is the lowest overall player in the entire lineup, but maybe all he needed was a change of scenery, and if that's the case, he would be breaking the cycle of prospects who lose their careers in Chicago. I can already tell this year's team has so much more potential than last year's, and that is really showing on opening day, as Gavin Sheets just obliterated that one to straightaway center. Forget about it. Griffin Canning lets that slider get away from him, and Sheets takes full advantage, and just like Encarnacion, he's under 70 overall, but playing way above his ratings. I am so excited to continue going balls deep with Sheets this season, and here's another guy who's very underrated, Dominic Fletcher, scoring again. That was a very fun sneak peek at the type of team we can become, as the combination of 12 hits from our offense alongside a Drew Thorpe gem was too much for them to handle. We definitely still have a long way to go, but it feels really good to get an opening day win after what happened last year, as I think we started out like 0-24 last season. It's going to be very interesting to see how this team improves over time as guys continue to get more reps, and of course as we start to call up that first wave of prospects. I am curious to see if we can win this first series, but we lost the second game, and the third game is very close as we just tied it up with an 8th inning RBI single. I remember last year's schedule started with a bunch of playoff teams in a row, so the Angels are a really good change of pace, and winning a series to start things off would be great, but they just retook the lead. Our offense has really slowed down since opening day as we lose this game, and after our rally in the 8th, this one really stings. At least on the bright side, our next opponent right after this are the Oakland Athletics, but we're jumping into the final game of this series because it is very close, as we are tied at 3 apiece in the 7th inning, and Christian Arroyo just smacked home the go-ahead RBI. That was a big play in a clutch situation as Andrew Vaughn adds another, so we match our opening day run total with 5, but here come the Angels. We took a 2-run lead just so the Angels could come back, as we lose our first series 3-1 despite showing so many flashes of good things to come. If we play as good as we did against the Angels, I think we're gonna beat the Oakland A's, and in the first game, we're tied up at 3 apiece. In the bottom of the 8th, Oakland has a runner on first base, but Marinaccio just struck out Brunt Rooker and is now trying to put them away. However, Lawrence Butler delivers a go-ahead double. All we needed was one more out to escape that, but now our chances of winning are very slim facing Mason Miller, as the Athletics win game number 1. If we can't beat Oakland, I really don't know what to think, but now Drew Thorpe is on the mound for us, pitching a gem, which makes it very unfortunate that our offense has not come to play today, at least until the 8th inning when we drive in a go-ahead RBI double. That is a big deal, and now Gavin Sheets is gonna add another run as we secure a very deserved win for Drew Thorpe, and it's worth mentioning he's pitched in every game we've won this season. We have a true ace pitcher on our hands, especially when the rest of our guys can't do anything, so because we just lost a series to Oakland, I think it's time to look at scouting. We have the number 2 draft pick, so of course there's a generational talent at the top of the board, but if Joe Dubois from Canada falls one spot to us, we would be getting an immediate impact hitter. He looks like an elite slugger who can single-handedly change the trajectory of our franchise, but after that, there's of course a bunch of closers and a third baseman named Henry Garcia, who I'm also gonna look at. While we're pretty good at shortstop, we could use a lot more depth at third base, second base, and first base, so Garcia, alongside other prospects like Dustin Chan and Pedro Guerrero, are definitely getting scouted. Our schedule immediately gets harder following the first week of scouting, although we're only down 1 to the Twins, and on top of that, an error allowed us to get 2 aboard before Fletcher ties the game. That's a big deal, as Minnesota is just one of the playoff teams in our stacked division, so right now we're competing at least until Buxton goes deep. That puts them back on top, but unfortunately, our bullpen has blown another game, and that has to be so frustrating for Drew Thorpe, who once again only gave up 2 runs, but we may not be done as Corey Lee drives this back to the wall and off of it for a 2 RBI double. We have rallied back back to make this just a 2-run game, but if we're gonna pull off a miracle, we have to do it against one of the best relievers in baseball. That was not gonna happen though, so we lose, and this is entirely on our bullpen. We had tied the game before they scored 5 unanswered runs in just 2 innings, so even though we are better on paper than last year, we still can't expect to be good. However, before we get to our next week of scouting, I'm jumping into this game against Boston because we just tied it in the bottom of the 8th and could have a chance for a walk-off, but never mind. In these heartbreaking losses, it's always a different bullpen arm that finds a way to disappoint me, and all Steven Wilson had to do is get one more out to keep it tied going into the bottom of the 9th, but he couldn't even do that, and it's the same old song and dance. I'm looking for an ounce of hope in scouting, but our first week on Henry Garcia suggests he is not the guy, and that may not be good for us considering the next guy I want, Pedro Guerrero, looks very, very similar. It does appear there are some hitters at other positions like Brian Armas and Darren Belcher who could be good options, but above all else, I really hope that we get Joe Dubois because if you remember, we had the #1 pick until the lottery bumped us down to 2. Until we start playing teams we can actually beat, I'm just gonna keep simulating. And that brings us all the way to our next week of scouting where we see that Pedro Guerrero is also really bad. I'm kind of starting to panic about this first pick because I don't want to take another catcher, so I may have to start scouting some later first round talent and hope I find a gem. Someone like Tommy Garden could surprise us, and because his overall rating is more realistic compared to guys like Thomas Wooden and Jonathan Fellows, I think I'm going to give him a shot. We're taking on the Angels for the second time of the season, and we just made it a 1-run game, and that was Christian Encarnacion picking up his 5th RBI of the season, and he has been kind of a surprise positive. My goal was to plug in as many high potential guys as I possibly could into this lineup and see what happens, and there's no way Gavin Sheets launches a go-ahead pinch hit home run. We just took the lead on a 466-foot nuke into right field, and ever since Sheets came into our lineup mid-season last year, we have been a better team. That was easily our most clutch rally of the rebuild, as we finally won a close game to win the series. I'm glad one good thing happened to us because we are striking out so far in scouting, as I don't know what it is with these early round infielders, but so far I'm not finding anybody that I can even draft, so maybe it's time to move on, because we do have to scout outside the first round, and Roger Correa is a great example of somebody I'm interested in. The Kansas City Royals are once again the best team in our division, so I feel like we're going to be chasing them for a long time, but in this game, we might have a chance to beat them thanks to a great performance from Drew Thorpe. We are tied up at 8 apiece in the bottom of the 8th, and neither team is giving an inch, so there's a very good chance we could be heading to extra innings. However, we are going to get the chance to walk it off, and Corey Lee delivers with one swing to deep center field as he ends the game, and his entire team is waiting there celebrating. That is a signature victory against one of the best teams in all of baseball, and even though we're still in last place midway through May, it's a lot better than last year, as guys like Gavin Sheets and Andrew Vaughn are keeping us going, as Vaughn especially is putting up Silver Slugger caliber numbers. This is the exact type of performance Chicago's been waiting on for the past 5 years, and if you remember last year, it was Gavin Sheets who broke out, so seeing Andrew Vaughn join him this year is awesome. Aside from those guys though, Christian Encarnacion is really our next best player, and then after that, there is a pretty major fallout among regular guys. However, our rotation has been surprisingly decent this season, with Drew Thorpe of course putting up amazing numbers, but on top of that, Davis Martin, who played pretty bad last year, is also having a bounce back season, along with Jonathan Cannon, who's been even better on paper and is improving pretty fast. After that, we've seen our bullpen be pretty hit or miss, but honestly, these numbers are not terrible, and going over to our closer, Porter Hodge is playing great. Also, as I mentioned this year, there's a few prospects to keep an eye on for a call-up, including Colson Montgomery and Kyle Teal, who are both starting to heat up, so there is a very good possibility that we will see both of those guys along with starting pitcher Noah Schultz. This has been one of the fastest risers in the entire system, and he has a very nice frame at 6'9" and is putting up amazing numbers in AAA. I'm going to give a more extensive farm system update at the All-Star break, but for now we have to look at scouting, where I finally found a good position player in Mike Seibel. I don't usually scout 23-year-olds unless I feel like they are very special, which Seibel absolutely is, coming in with a very high ceiling and a high floor. He may be a later round prospect, but ironically, aside from Joe Dubois, he is the best position player I have found so far, and he's so good that I feel like even if we do get Joe Dubois, I'm going to take him anyways. I do want to get some more project level players like we took last year, and I think I found a very interesting one in Mackenzie Rich, who does have the chance to be a very high potential guy with with good enough contact to develop early on, and he's a switch hitter. This team continues to show occasional flashes of greatness that have me very excited, and now we're looking for a huge sweep against the Tigers as Chain hits this into the gap for a massive RBI that gives us a 2-run lead. Now we just need to survive the last 3 innings, which may be tough, as Marinaccio gives up a run and eventually the lead. My biggest issue with him is I feel like he cannot throw a strike to save his life, but thankfully we get out of this. So now we really need to win this because I am not going to allow our bullpen to blow another game, and what a play from Chang. The 23-year-old has honestly been one of the bigger surprises on our team, as the Pirates did not offer him a contract in the offseason, and needing as much help as we could get, I decided to sign him, but I never expected a 727 OPS. He secures us a crucial out, and here's a punch out from Wilson, and just like in the Royals game, we have a chance for a walk-off, but we just struck out, so there are 2 outs, and there's no way. Luis Robert Jr., giddy up and goodbye. I definitely did not expect that one, as he lets that fly, and the no-doubter gives us a huge sweep, and recently it seems we've been one of the clutchest teams in the league. That was the best possible way to bounce back after tough series against the Astros, the Diamondbacks, and the Phillies, but once again, we're facing a good team in the Braves. After weeks of failing in position player scouting, I feel like we're finally identifying prospects that we could actually consider drafting, and I'm trying to keep my streak alive by finding a good center fielder. And what about Wesley Rosado? If he is anywhere close to his potential top speed, he is a very fun prospect, and of course you can never have enough speed. It is once again time for the Crosstown Classic, with the big change being the Cubs are the World Series champs, so with that being considered, I think it's very impressive. We're in a 0-0 tie. This shutout has been led by Davy Garcia, who's still in the game, and while he still has B potential at 25 years old, his clock is running out, and this season hasn't been super good. However, securing a win against the World Series champs would be very impressive, as he's facing a full count against Kyle Tucker, and thankfully he didn't swing. That changeup was absolutely not where it was supposed to be, but it was different enough that Kyle Tucker decided not to swing at this, and Gavin Sheets nearly sends this out of the park. We were just inches away from scoring the game's first run, but it does advance Encarnacion to third, who will score on a sac fly. Now it is all up to our closer, Porter Hodge, who has had a very good season so far, but he needs to be more than perfect with the tying run on third base, and despite a ground out and a fly out, they score. There wasn't much we could do to avoid that, although we can make it even harder in the 11th as Dominic Fletcher goes deep, and Tyson Miller is swearing into his glove. He left that right over the middle. That was the first pitch we got of the 11th inning, and we crushed it to right field. So while our lineup is inconsistent, we continue to flash potential at just the right times, and holding the defending World Series champs to 1 run is a big deal. We had 11 hits in this game, and so many of them came from the bottom of our lineup, which is very impressive, because the last time we checked out the stats, Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets were pretty much our only meaningful contributors, but very recently, more guys have started to heat up, and our team looks a lot more well-balanced across the board. There's only a month before the draft, and now that we've finished scouting pitchers, we can focus entirely on position players the rest of the way, and while I am going to add 2 infield prospects, I'm very intrigued after a week of scouting Wesley Rosado, who can definitely become a great athlete with solid enough contact to start out. I'm going to give him another week while my search for a good third baseman also continues alongside shortstop Sean Valenzuela. Even though we had a rough start in scouting, I feel like our luck has turned around very fast, and there are some prospects I'm very interested in, so I'm excited to add to what is already the #1 farm system in all of the league. Also, keep in mind that we are very close to calling up several prospects from AAA, so our minor league system is going to have a few open spots. We just secured a series win against the Toronto Blue Jays, so while we're still a bottom 5 team in baseball, we're definitely not the worst, and on the scouting end, I just uncovered a huge gem in Sean Valenzuela. The offense certainly needs a lot of work, but what I'm very interested in is his combination of fielding, athleticism, and versatility, as it seems every team needs some sort of utility infielder. He is also only 18 years old, so there's plenty of chances for him to develop into something more, and those young project players are what I'm looking for the later rounds of the draft. The White Sox are 32-52 entering the month of July, and looking at our offense, Luis Robert Jr. continues to improve, while Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets are still our best home run hitters. Another player who has really caught fire lately is Christian Encarnacion, who now has an 800 OPS, and if he can work out for us long-term as a Rule 5 draft pickup, he has 5 years before free agency. However, Alex Kirilloff was another Rule 5 guy that I'm pretty excited about, even though he's underperformed a little bit, as he's also on a hot streak and is 3rd on our teams in home runs despite playing a limited role. The numbers for Drew Thorpe and Jonathan Campbell Cannon continue to look very good, as Thorpe actually has a winning record. But aside from those two guys, ever since Davy Garcia shut out the Cubs, he has been performing better, but then our rotation immediately falls off a cliff. Phil Bickford was another one of our Rule 5 draft successes, as he has an ERA under 3 and a whip approaching 1. And the really cool thing about hitting on Rule 5 guys early in the rebuild is they still have so much team control remaining. Then of course, at closer is the guy that we traded Yoan Moncada for, and that is Porter Hodge. And I honestly was expecting him to only be a temporary option as a closer. And even though we have a very talented prospect coming up in Ben Clemente, Porter is not giving up this role easily. We are rapidly approaching the draft, which is on the 12th, but before we get there, we have a huge series against the 4th place team in our division, the Minnesota Twins, and this is a game I can jump into. I am not exaggerating when I say that passing up the Twins on its own would make this a successful year, and winning this series would help us gain quite a bit of ground on them, as it's tied at 0 apiece, but here's a double. I was just talking about Christian Encarnacion, and he has a chance to be the hero, which he's gonna do, going the other way, and it stays fair for a 2-run shot. What a play for the Rule 5 draft pickup, who I'm sure the Cincinnati Reds are very bummed they let go, as the former top 100 prospect is reviving his career in Chicago. I think one of the funniest things about this offense is 3 of our best players are first basemen, who were once considered top prospects in all of baseball, but have kinda disappointed, but all 3 of them have found a way to revive their careers in a place where prospects normally go to die. Now it is up to Alex Wood to continue his shutout, but there's a 3-run bomb, so after putting up a 2-run bomb just an inning ago, we have already lost our lead. On top of that, we have to deal with flamethrower Johan Duran, and anytime you're facing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs, you're gonna have a rough time, but Encarnacion, are you serious? He is the lowest overall player in our lineup, but has scored every single run of the game, as we are tied once again, and it's very early, but I think there's a chance he's here for a while. That is a big deal, as we are giving ourselves a chance to walk this game off, and of course, they are keeping Duran in. Aside from the legendary Encarnacion, I don't know if anyone else can touch him, but at least the good news is we wore them out, so I don't think we're gonna see him again. To my surprise, our bullpen actually held up strong, and here is a walk-off RBI single for Miguel Vargas, as that was a very quick round of extra innings, and we come out on top. Huge shout out to the rightful player of the game, Christian Encarnacion, who had 2 homers in the 6th and the 8th inning, and it's very fair to say that we would not have gotten that win without him. This is a great series to end off on going into the draft as we sweep them, and I feel like that could set us up to catch fire down the line and hopefully jump them for 4th place in our division. Scouting is officially complete, so it is time for the MLB draft, where of course my number 1 target is generational talent Joe Dubois. Obviously I didn't scout him, but I'm 99% sure he's generational, but because the draft lottery kicked us out of the number 1 overall pick, we don't have a lot of other options, so I think I might be taking a pitcher. I usually don't like taking pitchers in round 1 just because position guys are so much more valuable, but I do like Jason Stevens. And the good news for us, if this position player class isn't as solid as last year's, our scouts did an amazing job uncovering great pitching talent. Also, if we do happen to miss out on Joe, I really think that Mike Sable is kind of the great value version in the best way possible, and the great thing about him is we should be able to get him in the later part of the draft. While pitching is the strength of this class, there are quite a few position players like Greg McDermott and Luther Williams that I'd be very interested in taking a shot on, and with our 3rd selection, I'd really like to land Sean Valenzuela, who is a shortstop with great positional versatility. There's also a few outfielders I'm really interested in, like Wesley Rosado, along with Mackenzie Rich, and obviously we're not going to land everybody, but just a few of those guys would make me very happy. Just as always, I have built my draft board, and the way these players fall is pretty much going to be the way that I select. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that I don't just put anybody on this draft board, so the fact that we have this many guys that I'd even consider drafting is awesome. However, there's only 1 pick standing in the way between us and Joe Dubois, and if we get him, that would be a miracle, but I'm fully prepared to take Jason Stevens at number 2, so I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off and get this out of the way, as he is the number 1 pick. I have seen generational players like this drop to 2, or even in rare cases, number 5 or 6, but unfortunately, the Houston Astros are a semi-confident organization, so us losing out in the draft lottery ends up hurting us in the end, but hopefully Jason Stevens can come in and make us proud. However, there's a chance that with our next pick, we could double up on starting pitcher, as Duncan Finley is the number 6 player on my draft board, but even if he does not make it to pick number 35, which honestly is about a 50-50 shot, there are other players that I like as well. I'm just gonna go ahead and simulate to our next pick, and sure enough, both of the starting pitchers that I was looking at are gone, as Finley goes at 23 to the Brewers, which does kind of put a wrench in our plans, but Wesley Rosado is here, and I'm not even gonna overthink this, because he looks like a great talent. This is the first center fielder we've drafted in this rebuild, and we were really missing out on speed in last year's class, so even though I am taking pretty much the best player available at every spot, I'm glad that I'm adding some athletic guys, and that continues with Sean Valenzuela. At this point in the draft, we have 4 picks remaining, so I need to be strategic, especially because almost every pitcher on my board was surprisingly taken way earlier than expected. It is not common for a discovery pitcher to get taken in the first round, especially at 15 overall, where Daryl Monahan went, and he was a player that I was really hoping would fall later in the draft, as so many of those discovery guys tend to do. However, after simulating to our next selection, we can see that Mike Seibel is still on the board, and if you remember, I called him the Walmart brand of the generational first baseman that went number 1, so I feel like I need to take him earlier rather than later. We just got the number 15 player in the entire draft at 77, and so far it seems our big board is still intact as we have 3 selections to go. In this spot, I'm going to take athletic right field prospect Mackenzie Rich, who I've been high on for quite a while, and I know I want to take one more pitcher in this draft, but as you can see, 3 of them are still on the board in round number 5, so I'm going to go ahead and take a high upside player in Luther Williams. Now I think we just cross our fingers that one of these starters is on the board, and as you can see, every single discovery guy is still here. So we are ending our draft with Bobby Wazlanusk. I don't even know how to say that name, bro, but I'm just gonna take him. I really hope I find a way to trade that guy out of here before he gets to the majors, because I'm never gonna be able to say that name. But nonetheless, he concludes another solid draft. At the All-Star break, we are 38 and 59, which is still last place in our division, but it's actually way better than I expected, considering we're barely at the bottom of the American League. But if we were in the National League, there would be 4 teams below us. I think a huge reason for this is that Drew Thorpe is having a Cy Young level season, while Jonathan Cannon has also seen a very recent step forward, along with Davy Garcia, so we do have a very fun young group of pitchers that we're only gonna add to. Of course, when I say that, that means it's finally time to add Noah Schultz to the roster, because these numbers are off the charts, and he's already up to a 76 overall, so I cannot leave him off the 40-man and the 26-man any longer. With his addition, I am now confident we have 4 quality starters, in addition to a bullpen that honestly has not been bad for most of the season, with several standouts like Rob Marinaccio and Porter Hodge. Then of course on offense, Andrew Vaughn continues to have a great season, and as you can see, he did make the All-Star game, and even though we are required to have one guy in the game, I feel like he really deserved it no matter what. However, another player who has really surprised me is Christian Encarnacion, who may be the second best player on our team, ranking 2nd for OPS, 3rd for RBIs, and 4th in home runs. Other than that, the offensive numbers may not be enough to compete this year, but if you remember, coming into this year, our goal was to get as much development for our young guys as we possibly can, because we have a lot of players with A or B potential that have certainly made the most of this season to get better. However, despite this, we are struggling in the middle infield, as Miguel Vargas and Christian Arroyo really aren't doing much at second base, and for a lot of the year, I really thought that Chang was going to be a better solution at shortstop, but as you can see, he has certainly fallen off. For that reason, I think it's finally time to bring up one of our best prospects in Colson Montgomery, who is already the best shortstop in the organization on paper and is putting up pretty good numbers at AAA. A huge part of the future of the Chicago White Sox could be arriving right now, and even though we're not contending this season, we're going to get a lot of reps for guys who could be on a contending team in the future. By the way, aside from Andrew Vaughn, our only other All-Star was Porter Hodge, and all I can say is I did not expect to get this type of player when we acquired him in that trade for Yohan Moncada last year. One of my favorite prospects in this entire organization is Ben Clemente, who at 20 years old is starting his career in AAA, and as you can see, these numbers are pretty good, and while I still might call him up before the end of the season, it would not be to dethrone Hodge from that closer role, because with the way he's playing, he might already be one of the best closers in all of baseball. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I do want to check out the rest of our farm system later, but first, I want to see Colson Montgomery's MLB debut, as we're going up against the Dodgers in our first game out of the break. break. He's trying to score Corey Lee, who just hit a 2 RBI triple, but pops it up. So now it's all up to Porter Hodge to get the save, which he blows immediately and adds another run. We had a 2-run lead against one of baseball's best teams, but of course our all-star closer, who I was just praising, couldn't get it done. That is disappointing, but now it's time for Noah Schultz's debut, and I can't think of much better redemption than getting him his first win at home. Through 5 innings, both him and Yamamoto have no-hitters going, at least until Alex Kirilloff puts our first run on the board. That baseball was absolutely crushed into right field by a guy who's been pretty up and down, as Kirilloff was another high potential player we took in the Rule 5 draft, but he's been overshadowed by Christian Encarnacion. In real life, he actually retired this offseason due to injuries, so it'd be great to revive his career, because building my own universes is one of my favorite things about MLB The Show, and there goes Schultz's no-hitter. I don't know how many guys have pitched a no-no in their first career start, but I gotta imagine it is a pretty short list. He may have come up short of that goal, but he's still in the game in the 9th, and Ohtani could be the last out of a complete game shutout. After a foul ball, it is a 1-1 count, but he snuck a changeup in low, so he's looking for the final strike, but Shohei is just too good. He is so lucky that opposite field double stayed in the yard, as even though the tying run's on second, Max Muncy cannot do anything, so Noah Schultz is able to get it done. That is a complete game shutout where he only gave up 2 hits and 1 walk, and between him and Drew Thorpe, along with maybe even Jonathan Cannon and Davy Garcia, we might have built one of the best young pitching rotations in the league with many more reinforcements on the way. Speaking of future players though, it is the start of August, which means we can finally view this draft class we are so excited about, as even though we did not get the generational talent first baseman, I still think there's a lot of good here, and that's absolutely the case. By trusting our scouts, we managed to land 7 players with potential above 85, which is really more than we could ever ask for, especially after last year. And while I'm gonna have to talk about everybody, I think we have to start at the top with Jason Stevens, who is 93 potential, 68 overall. As I've mentioned before, I really don't like to draft pitchers high just because the game creates so many of them later on, just like Bobby Lasniewski or whatever his name is. But considering we missed out on an 81 overall 18-year-old, I really cannot complain about the next best option. Jason Stevens will come in very well-rounded, very similar to Noah Schultz, and with the way that guy has played, I'm very excited about that, considering Stevens' potential is even higher. I gotta admit, I was hoping for a bit higher potential for Wesley Rosado, as our scouts were very high on him, but as you can see, we are still getting a very solid prospect with great athleticism, and while there's certainly so much to clean up, he's only 18 years old, and on top of that, his contact's good enough to at least help him develop early on. Just like many of the position guys from last year, he is certainly a project, and the same thing goes for Sean Valenzuela, who has very good athleticism, fielding abilities, and versatility, but that offense is gonna be an issue for a very long time. To tell you the truth, I'm worried he is never gonna be a major league caliber player, but I think first baseman Mike Seibel fully makes up for any complaints I had. During the draft, I called this guy the Walmart version of Joe Dubois, and honestly, that was not a dig by any means, as even though he is 23 years old, that offense is gonna be MLB ready sooner rather than later, and while Andrew Vaughn is enjoying a breakout level season, he does hit free agency in 2027, which means we do need to start thinking about the future sooner rather than later. Then going down the list, we also took another outfielder who is B potential in Mackenzie Rich, and just like Wesley Rosado in center field, I was hoping he'd be a little bit better, but to be fair, potential can improve, and I think both of these guys have very similar skill sets that could allow them to do just that. Then in round 5, we got an absolute steal, taking our 3rd infielder in Luther Williams, and just like many of our prospects, him and the starting pitcher we took at the end are both very raw, but just as we set out to do, we are adding so much upside to the organization. I am very excited about the future, especially because Schultz and Montgomery have already made us a better team, and that is only the start of a farm system that currently has 12 top 100 guys. We are trying to start August strong by sweeping the Toronto Blue Jays, and Alex Kirilloff just hit a huge double the other way, so there are 2 guys in scoring position for Montgomery. That slider really should have scored both of them, but he was late on it, so this sac fly is gonna have to do, and it actually ended up making all the difference since we only won by 1 run. In the end, that series would actually matter, as it was the tiebreaker that kept us out of the cellar of the American League, as we finished 1 game under 100 losses at 63 and 99. There's still a lot of work to be done, but unlike last year, we didn't have the worst record in baseball, and despite finishing near the bottom in most most important offensive categories, a few stats, including our team ERA, were more towards the middle of the pack. The development of this young pitching staff really has given me so much hope for the future of our team, as we have undoubtedly found our number 1 and 2 starters, with Garcia and Cannon being semi-decent. Even though Andrew Vaughn had an all-star level season, he did slow down a bit near the end, but regardless, I am still very pleased with his development and think we might be able to get something for him at next year's deadline. He was definitely the highlight of our offense, alongside Gavin Sheets, who hit over 20 bombs, but going down the list of OPS, it is very disappointing that Christian Encarnacion did not sustain his first half play. As a 67 overall 25-year-old, his development is on a shorter leash than some other players, and the same thing goes for other guys we took a chance on like Jake Bowers and Alex Kirilloff. While getting Luis Robert Jr. back up to 80 overall is a big deal, I'm not really pleased with any of these numbers, as he may have been third on the team in RBIs, but it really did not feel like that, and it's kind of the same story for Corey Lee. They're developing, but maybe not fast enough to stay on the roster long term, and that is especially true for Lee, who's already getting pushed by one of the best prospects in the organization, Damon Kelso. He was great this year, along with so many of the other players that were taken in this class, including double-A'ers like Willie Stevens, Rod Breeding, and JJ Romero, who are all top 15 prospects who are slowly molding into the players we want them to be. Once again, we are not going to be active in free agency, but I am starting the offseason by trading Miguel Vargas, who could really use a change of scenery, and the Washington Nationals really need a second baseman, so in return, they're going to give us a bullpen arm. We probably could have gotten a bit more for him, but I feel like that's a pretty fair deal for an underproductive middle infielder. And now in my second trade, I am moving 2 decent players for another decent player who could add some depth. Obviously, those are not very exciting trades, but like I said, I'm trying to make this as realistic as possible, and I feel like so much of that realism is not ripping off the CPU. In free agency, I am really trying to find a reliable starting pitcher who's not going to cost us a whole lot of money, and while I was very interested in Chris Paddock, he is just too expensive. I also don't want to get someone like Clayton Kershaw, who's a million years old, so I'm gonna keep scrolling until I find Mike Soroka. He did pitch really well the one year he was here, so I'm very interested in some sort of reunion, and at just over $6 million per year, that is not a bad price. I am very interested in bringing him back, but I want to make sure that I didn't miss anybody potentially better, and here is Tyler Alexander, who I always like. Just as he always seems to do, he performs very well in franchise with an ERA under 3, and because he's very interested in being closer to home, we can get him for about half the price as Soroka. I am also bringing in Brendan Rodgers on a 2-year deal, along with a very talented outfielder who I'm surprised is in free agency in Stone Garrett. I would have figured that a guy with this much potential coming off a solid year would get arbitration, but for whatever reason, the Cardinals did not offer it to him. Just to make this a bit more realistic, I'm going to pay him a much larger arbitration number than he's asking for, because if we do sign him, I think him and Luis Robert can become a dangerous duo in the outfield. It is time for the draft lottery, which certainly did not do us great last year, because even though we just dropped down 1 spot, we lost out on a generational player, but we go up to number 1 this year, making up for it. So far, this has been a very successful offseason, as here is Stone Garrett joining the squad, and I'm immediately going to plug him into the leadoff spot in our lineup. Of course, him and Brendan Rodgers are the new free agent additions, but we're also going to see Kyle Teal for the first time, along with Rule 5 draft pickup Jordan Diaz. Diaz is going to be replacing Christian Encarnacion, who I did send all the way down to AA, because despite the addition of Mike Seibel, who's starting at AAA, I still believe in his development. We are no longer required to keep him at the majors since it's been over a year since we drafted him, and I'd like to save his service time. My goal this season is to simply win 70 games, but we're starting off against a great Royals team, and considering they won 110 games last year, I'm very nervous. Early on, it is very clear they see us as an easy win, as Donovan drops an RBI single into right field, and after quickly getting his first 2 outs of the year, Drew Thorpe cannot end this inning. This game could easily be 0-0 right now, but we're getting bad luck, and if they score any more runs, it could be game over for us as the bases are loaded. This is not the start I expected from Drew Thorpe, as our ace is having a very hard time hitting the plate, and when he does, it gets launched out of the park. In just the second inning, we have already given up an opening day grand slam to Brendan Donovan, and obviously I'm still excited about this season, but maybe a little less confident seeing our best player get shelled. New addition Brendan Rodgers secured the first extra base hit of the season before before Stone Garrett scored him. So at the very least, we are not getting shut out, but we're also not pulling off a comeback. I'm willing to bet that pretty much all of us have been to a baseball game where our team just gets absolutely blasted. And at the very least, this is just opening day, but we better hope that our team puts up more of a fight in the remaining 161 games, especially Drew Thorpe. I really think that was just a blow-up start because he has been so consistent throughout the entire rebuild. And as for the rest of our roster, we have so many high upside guys who still have not reached their potentials, which is really fun considering we also have 16 top 100 prospects. I think the most impressive thing about our farm system is that every single one of our top 13 players were selected in each of the last 2 drafts. And while there certainly are some projects like Craig Crosby, JJ Romero, and Rod Breeding, there are also players like Jason Stevens and more specifically Mike Seibel who may not be far away from the majors. We really need to bounce back in the rest of this series to get our season back on a good note, but that is just not going to happen. So we've lost the series, but at the very least, we can avoid the sweep, and that is exactly what Gavin Sheets is trying to help us do. That is a huge home run for one of my favorite players to pick up in franchise, but I don't think he's been on a single one of my teams ever since the Portland Pickles, so it's really nice to have him back on the channel. I don't know where this offensive performance was in the first 2 games of the series, but I'm really liking what I'm seeing, as we are shutting out the best team in our division and just made it 7-0. I think we finally saw the true potential of our offense, as we scored 8 runs on 9 hits, and huge shout out to Jonathan Cannon for shutting out a 100-win team. That is a very satisfying win, but we're not going to have a second to celebrate it, because our next opponent is a dangerous Atlanta team, and in the 9th inning, we're trying to tie it up. We have runners at the corners with 1 away, and here's a huge RBI single from Corey Lee. So we're neck and neck with a very good team, and on the first pitch they give to Alex Kirilloff, he is going to give us the lead. Now Porter Hodge is trying to close this out, and after a rougher second half last year, he gets his redemption as we get our 2nd win in a row. We're very lucky to be 2-2 after losing our first game by 12 runs, and we're going to have a ton of confidence if we win the series. We've started every season of the rebuild off with a tough schedule, but it feels like we can finally at least compete with these teams. And right now it feels like our offense is waking up at just the right time as we tie it up. Now we're just counting on our bullpen to hold it down, which they're able to do, so we're going into the 9th inning tied up. We have a man on first base, and while this is very weak contact, we're lucky it wasn't a double play, but there are still 2 outs, so we need Diaz to deliver, but he flies out. That means we could be heading to extras, but instead the Braves walk it off, as Marte was the very first batter, but ended it immediately. That was so similar to many of our losses last year, but we do win the series, as Drew Thorpe gets his first win of the season, putting together 7 innings with only 1 run. That means we are still 500 to start the year, but maybe the most important thing about this season is who we take with the #1 overall draft pick, and it's very important we get this right considering the Astros took a generational first baseman right in front of us who's the #1 prospect in all of baseball. We're going to be able to tell pretty quickly if there's a similar prospect in this class, and I am really not seeing it. I think there might still be some good players like Jesse Jordan, along with another first baseman we don't need in Christopher Mize, but of course I was really hoping that the game would give us some sort of consensus #1 selection. This is very likely going to be another situation where I just take the best player available since there's really nothing else to do, and because of that, the first position player I'm scouting is none other than Mize himself. We are looking for revenge against the Astros for taking a franchise-altering player right in front of us, as the winner of this game will take the entire series. Down 1, the bases are loaded for Brendan Rodgers, who unfortunately flies out to right center, so we're really struggling to find offensive consistency early on in this season, and that could cost us in the series as Andrew Vaughn makes good contact the other way, but not good enough. Another series loss drops us below 500, and that is not good because this early section of the season is very important for our team. Checking out scouting after 1 week, Christopher Mize is a very solid player, but I'm glad our scouts still think there are guys that are better, because even though I am going to draft the best player available, it'd really help if it wasn't another first baseman. We could use a solid third baseman close to the show, and Vernon Sparbori is exactly that, and he would be a great addition because while we have solid prospects like Rod Breeding and Luther Williams, they are very far away from the show where we could use an upgrade. Early on in the year, we have shown flashes of being a playoff team, but losing to Oakland would be embarrassing, so we really need the top of our lineup to step it up, but Andrew Vaughn flies out to left. That is very unfortunate as they immediately score another run, so we're definitely in a bit of a pickle and need to break through this shutout, which is exactly what Brendan Rodgers is gonna do. That makes this a 1-run game in the 9th inning, at least until Oakland scores, so this was an embarrassing game that we deserved to lose. After splitting that series, it's clear we have a lot of work to do, but even though we're still not looking great, statistically we are better than last year with many offensive numbers coming in the 20s. I think it's worth mentioning this rebuild is still very much on track, as our young guys are really just experiencing some growing pains, and I'm very confident that as they continue to get more reps, we're also going to see our team win more games. I found some pretty solid infielders so far, but I want to go to the outfield and scout Hector Feliz, who's very speedy, and because it's the third week of scouting, this will be the final week that we look at international pitchers. There are some pretty good players in this pool I'd like to learn more about, like Willie Bautista and Gary Mays, but once we're done with the international guys, I'm excited to go to the West because Jesse Jordan is from Washington. I'm excited to see just how good the #1 player in the class is, but first we have a big division series, and in game 1, we're tied up at 2 apiece as Montgomery gets a hold of this one into right field, but it stays in the yard. We left 2 runners on base, and now they take the lead, and our consistent failure to win this type of game is exactly what's held us back so far in the series, but here we go, Gavin Sheets. He ties it right back up with 2 outs in the 8th, and now we have a chance to walk it off in front of our home crowd. The winning run's already on first base, and now a walk gets him to second, and we're still in a very good spot with 0 away, and while this is a fly out, it will get runners to the corners. Now Stone Garrett can drive in the winning run, but he has to be careful of the double play, and that's a huge bummer. That was the one thing that could not happen in that situation, but the good news is we will get a second chance in extra innings where Brendan Rodgers sends this more than far enough for a game-winning sacrifice fly. That is not a pretty win, but it's great to see us win a close game, but then in the next one, our offense completely exploded in a 13-run performance while Noah Schultz secured a complete game shutout. With those 2 wins, we have knocked them into the cellar of the AL Central, and winning the last game would secure us a big-time sweep. We are trying to end the month of April on the best note possible by getting back to 500, and sending a division rival further into the cellar would be a great way to do that. Stone Garrett just tied this game right back up with a huge double, so once again, we find a way to clutch up and get back into a close game. Once again, we are tied up in the 9th inning, but Hodge gives up a home run, so we're once again gonna need another rally as Dominic Fletcher strikes out, but they bail us out with a dropped strike 3 missed throw. That huge mistake just turned our first out into a double, and now we have runners at the corners for Stone Garrett, who was in the same position in the first game and once again comes up empty. Now we're in some trouble with 2 away, but Alex Kirilloff hit this just far enough away from the second baseman, so the game continues into extras once again where the Guardians have retaken their lead, and our backs remain against the wall, but I think this is going to be enough to tie it right back up as that throw is offline. Every time they've taken the lead, we have found a way to answer, and now in the 11th inning, it is time to win this as Corey Julks rounds third and heads home. We sweep the Guardians and start the month of May tied for first place in the division, and that is great timing as our offense is really starting to heat up and turn into something pretty respectable. Our pitching rotation is also slowly bouncing back after a pretty rough start to the year, as Davy Garcia is having a career year along with Noah Schultz, who's continuing his success from last year. We are fighting for first place in our division, but getting swept by the Nationals is not a very good look, and just a few weeks after being tied for first, we are in last place. That's one of the biggest issues with being in a competitive division, but at least on the positive side of things, I might have found my favorite player in the entire draft in Roberto Gonzalez. MLB has him ranked as the 52nd player in the draft, but there's no way he gets to our second pick, so at least up to this point, these 3 guys are the contenders for the #1 overall pick, especially because Jesse Jordan's a little disappointing. It is great to see us finding high-level talent, especially in a class that I was worried didn't have very much of it, and center fielder Sean Olivo is another guy I'm very interested in due to his speed and contact combination. I really thought that sweep against the Guardians could be the turning point this team needed, but instead they've fallen back into their old ways, as they are back under 500, but maybe this series against Toronto is a chance to get back over it. We have taken the lead with a 2-run inning, but the Blue Jays will match that, so we are once again trailing by 1 run, needing a rally, and Kyle Teal will deliver with a huge bomb into left center field, which sends home the runner. It has been a pretty quiet rookie year for Kyle Teal, who may be hitting 250, but is not showing a lot of power, so seeing him launch an opposite field double off the wall is a big deal. That would help us win this game in extra innings, which would ultimately lead to a series sweep and put us back in second place for the division. Even if we can't win the Central, we are only half a game out of a wild card spot, which is a huge deal, especially because I still feel like our best baseball is far ahead of us, as we only have a few guys over 750 950 OPS. Because we're actually in playoff contention this season, this year's Crosstown Classic matters a lot more than ones in the past, and with 2 on, Luis Robert Jr. goes deep to break a 0-0 tie. After 2 years in a row where he put up nearly identical numbers, we're still waiting to see any shade of the 2023 version, but he came through when we needed a big play to give us a win. We could be well on our way to winning this series as we're tied up at 3 apiece in the 7th inning, but unfortunately a flyout left 2 on and Seiya Suzuki hit a solo shot. That means we have to score a run off Munoz, which is not easy, as we time up his fastball but still fail to hit it. Stone Garrett is our last chance, but one swing is all he gets, as we lose 4-3 and sink even further outside of a playoff spot. We cannot afford to be losing series right now, but we just lost one to the Athletics to open the month, and this Chicago one is the same result. So despite the great improvements we've shown this season, we are still nothing more than a mediocre fringe playoff team at best, but at least on the scouting end of things, we continue to find good prospects. Quincy Cronin's another high-risk, high-reward prospect with very good power and decent enough athleticism to get by, and he has a very similar makeup to one of my favorite prospects in the organization, Willie Stevens, who has not played great at Double-A so far. One of my big priorities in this draft is to get more high-ceiling outfield prospects, because while we have guys like Craig Crosby and Wesley Rosado in center field, I feel like we could always use more talent back deep, and especially in left field. Luis Robert may only be on the team through 2027, while Stone Garrett's gone the next year. So while it may sound good to say that I'm preparing for the future, that future might need to come sooner rather than later. If we want to stay in the playoff hunt, we need to end our first half strong, but we can start to turn things around by rallying against a very good Kansas City team, and Stone Garrett comes up huge with a 3-run bomb. Without a doubt, he has been our best free agent signing of the entire video, putting this offense on his back, and he might have just stolen a victory from the jaws of defeat, which did help us win this series. However, before the break, we still have to take on the 2 best teams in our division, starting with the Tigers, and in the 6th inning of our first game, we tied it up before taking the lead with a sac fly. Our division has been very competitive this year, but it seems the Tigers have been the best team overall, so winning a series against them could be a great confidence booster, but what happened? Our closer, Porter Hodge, loads the bases, and they walk it off, and I'm now realizing that is not the first time he's done that this season, as his whip is 1.65. That is horrible, and I need to do something about it. So far in this rebuild, we have not called up a single guy we drafted ourselves, but that is about to change with the addition of Ben Clemente to the major league level, and I'm not even going to try to ease him in. He is our new closer. Porter Hodge has actually been our worst bullpen arm the entire year, so he can sit in the back, and that is a very quick fall off for a guy who just made the All-Star game last year. That is a very gutsy move, but it is not going to stop us from getting swept by the Tigers, and after a few more losses, I'm kind of thinking it's time to just go to the draft. We've done a great job of finding some solid draftable prospects, but of course there's still a few more that I'm interested in, including another closer in Howie Morris, who looks very good. As I said at the beginning of the season, I want to draft the best player available, and that philosophy really has not changed, but finding a gem like Roberto Gonzalez certainly complicates things, as he's technically the 52nd ranked talent in the draft, but I have very low confidence that he's going to make it to our next pick at 41. I definitely prefer him to Christopher Mize just because first base is not as valuable as a corner outfielder, so after winning the draft lottery and getting the #1 selection, we might be reaching for a player anyways. Our season was very competitive to start out, but now we're getting squashed by teams in our division, and because my goal was to approach this rebuild as realistically as I possibly could, we might be sellers at the deadline in order to move on from a guy like Andrew Vaughn, who's developing but is in the last year of his deal, along with maybe another wild card like Luis Robert or Gavin Sheets. However, I don't want to do this just yet because we're still 5 games out of a wild card spot, but if we continue to take a nosedive in July, I feel like I'm not going to have a choice. The rest of this month is very important, but of course we have to start with the 2026 draft, where I plan on taking Roberto Gonzalez at #1 just because I feel like he's a more complete player than Christopher Mize. I feel like this is one of the worst classes we could have the #1 pick in, but nonetheless we're gonna make it work. And another player that I was very much considering for the #1 selection was Sean Olivo, who has a excellent blend of contact and speed. It would be a miracle if he lasts to our second selection at 41, so I'm pretty content letting him pass me by, especially because there are so many other good outfielders on my board that I plan on taking. I think our board is so loaded from top to bottom that we're gonna basically make this draft entirely foolproof, as even at the very end, there are 5 very talented discovery pitchers that we can choose from. It is time time to get started, and since we have the number 1 overall pick, there is no use in waiting. We are taking Roberto Gonzalez, who may not be able to play very good defense, but I think he's going to hit the cover off the ball. I'm sure we shocked the entire world with that one, but it wasn't actually too insane for MLB The Show standards, especially because one of my favorite outfield prospects, Frank Sierra, just went at number 6. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure he's very talented, but I thought he was going to go like 4 rounds later than this, so that is a very interesting selection at number 6, as Sean Olivo goes at 13 and Gary Mays goes at 16. That definitely hurts, but then 9 picks later, my next favorite selection got taken in Quincy Cronin. So at this point, I'm kind of wondering if somebody in the organization leaked our draft board, because this is not going the way I was hoping. The new number 1 player on my board is a 22-year-old center fielder named Eric Carruth, and he's still a really good high ceiling player, but at the same time, he was my emergency selection in this spot. I really thought this had the backbone to be our best draft ever, but outfielders are getting selected like 3 rounds in front of where they're supposed to. And then in round 3, my next favorite player got taken right in front of us, so I have to settle for another outfielder. I really thought I scouted well this year, but the only players left on my board in round 4 are all discovery prospects, so I'm kind of disappointed, but at least Howie Morris looks like a monster. To be fair though, I had no idea that players were going to get taken multiple rounds ahead of their slot value, and at least the game was nice enough to give us the 3rd and 10th best prospect in return. I was really hoping to load up on another speedy outfielder in this class, but it simply didn't work out, so we're going to end things off with our 3rd pitcher in a row. If I had any idea the board was going to fall this way, I would have taken Sean Olivo at number 1 without any question at all, because even though we got a center fielder in round 2, Eric Carruth is kind of the Walmart brand version of Olivo. I was really hoping that draft would give me some more confidence, but honestly, it was pretty underwhelming, and now we're 5 games below 500 with several of our best offensive players on cold streaks. Looking at our All-Stars, I don't know how Porter Hodge made the game for the 2nd year in a row, but it actually gets even weirder after that, as Brennan Rodgers is the only other guy that made it, and he really did not deserve it. On top of everything going wrong for this team, we have to play the Twins twice before the end of July, and because they're one of our biggest rivals, they would really enjoy sinking our season. However, we have the tying run on 3rd as All-Star Brendan Rodgers makes good contact but flies out. Nonetheless, that was a pretty good inning as we scored 2 runs and our bullpen holds up, but now in the 9th, we're facing Griffin Jax. All of his pitches have insane break, so he never fails to give me a headache, but with the tying run on first base, we fly out deep to left. For a split second, I really thought that one was gone, and then a timely high fastball ends the game. While Drew Thorpe did win us game 1, it's our only victory after the break so far, and that's only gonna continue, as we are slowly falling deeper into last place. I think it's very fair to say that we are not making the postseason this year, so I think this is a great time to trade Andrew Vaughn, who's on a hot streak and is in the last year of his deal. There's a couple playoff teams that could really use a first baseman, but I really think Seattle's the biggest example, and realistically, because he's only half a year away from free agency, this will not cost the Mariners a lot, but this 19-year-old left fielder Tom Tovar makes this a pretty decent deal for both sides. However, there is one more guy I want to move on from, and I think we can get much more than we just got for Vaughn, and that is Luis Robert Jr. Unfortunately, he has not developed into the superstar we expected him to be after his 2023 season, which does kind of limit his return, but on the other hand, he is still a Gold Glove defender, and on top of that, he has pretty solid power for a center fielder. We're going to be trading him to the Baltimore Orioles, who could really use a center fielder to propel themselves to the World Series, and while they're not willing to give up their future in Vance Honeycutt or even Alex Torres, the player I'm interested in is Ford Hughes, who is pretty raw but has elite athleticism and could be something within the next couple years. If Robert's last couple years were better, we could have gotten top prospect Alex Torres, but instead I'm pretty happy with Hughes. And while those 2 trades basically confirm we're giving up on the year, we got 2 solid outfield prospects that I'm very excited about in the future. We are playing the long game, so once I view our draft picks, I'm just going to simulate the entire rest of this season. And checking out our first look at this class, there's a lot of 80 potentials, but it's actually not bad. Our scouts made the right call on Roberto Gonzalez, who has 97 potential and is already 69 overall at 18 years old. So it really took a while, but I feel like we finally have a superstar outfielder of the future, along with Eric Carruth, who's also very good. I think the reason our scouts were not so high on Carruth is because he's 22 years old, but he's very impressive, especially considering he was the emergency agency selection in that spot, but as you can see, Sean Olivo is very, very good. There's a reason our scouts had him ranked as the number 6 player in the class, as that athleticism is deadly. But looking through the other players that we missed out on, Quincy Cronin went way earlier than expected, and it makes sense because he's really good. Gonzalez ended up being the best number 1 overall pick we could have taken, but if we didn't select him, it would have been Christopher Mize, who would not have been a downgrade by any means at all. I think all this just goes to show that you never really know what's going to happen in these drafts, so the best thing you can do is just load up your board with the best possible talent and trust your scouts the rest of the way. Willie Bautista is one player that I really thought was going to be better, considering our scouts had him ranked number 10 in the class, and while I expected at least a high 60s overall and a low 90s potential, this is certainly fine considering the last player we selected, Boris Martinez, may have been the biggest steal in the entire draft. I did not see this coming, and I think I even said when I drafted him that I was disappointed he was the best player on my board, but sure enough, he is making that take look completely ridiculous by being a 99 potential. Obviously, there are some players that I would have preferred to take over Alex Guzman, but no matter what you do, you can never scout everybody good, so I'm just glad we got a great combination of players. With all that done, we are simulating to the very end of the season as we are getting destroyed in the month of August, but even though we have a right to be disappointed with the way the season started, we still finished with over 70 wins in a division where every single team except for us made the playoffs. As far as this year's standouts go, I can't really point to many players on offense, to be honest with you, besides maybe Stone Garrett, who even then had only a 740 OPS and actually saw his potential go down. Colson Montgomery showed flashes of being our future, but then again, he's already 24 years old, and it feels like other players that I've been excited about, like Alex Kirilloff, Gavin Sheets, and Dominic Fletcher, really have not progressed the way that I wanted. Ending the season with only 4 regular contributors above 700 OPS certainly hurts a lot, and while I still really believe in this pitching rotation, guys like Jonathan Cannon, Davy Garcia, and Noah Schultz all took big steps back. I believe in using free agency to improve an existing core, but it feels like ours just hasn't been established yet, so there's no point. And the reality of drafting only for future potential means that many of the guys you take are not going to be pro ready for a very, very long time. However, for next year, it is very likely that we're going to see Mike Seibel at the major league level along with Hagen Smith, so hopefully that's the start of a brand new core. Brendan Rodgers was the definition of mid, so I don't think I'm going to bring him back on a team option. So we're going into free agency with a glaring need at second base that we need to address, and immediately I see Luis Ariz. He's coming off of a bit of a down year, and considering that he's asking for the same amount of money as Brendan Rodgers, I see no reason not to go for this move. And I know that's the biggest free agent contract I've ever given out, but I want to spend a little bit more on this team, especially considering that the young players are on their way. Along with Ariz, we're also investing in a Casey Mize reclamation project, which is a bit of a risk, but at his very worst, I feel like he's a solid 5 starter. Then for a third contract, we could use another outfielder after losing Luis Rober, and ironically, the best guy to fill that void is a former Chicago White Sox in Jake Bowers. In addition to those moves, I'm also trading our current 5 starter Davis Martin, who actually had a pretty good season, but doesn't really fit into the rotation anymore, and the Pittsburgh Pirates could really use his arm to round out their rotation, so in return, they're going to give us their backup second baseman, Spencer Horwitz. If I wasn't trying to do this as realistically as possible, I would have definitely extended Andrew Vaughn, because that potential is just too good for the contract he wants, but after a few up and down years in Chicago, I think it was only fair to let him test the market. At this point in the franchise, the draft lottery is probably not going to be nearly as important, but of course, we still have to test our luck, because as you see all the time, anything can happen, but we go down to 7. This is our lineup entering a very important season 4, and the cool thing is that even without Andrew Vaughn or Luis Rober, I feel like we're even more well-balanced than we were last year. Our pitching rotation should also take a big step forward with the addition of Casey Mize, because while his last year in Detroit was not good, I certainly believe in this reclamation project. Then looking at prospects who could come up to the show this year, I think we could finally see the first draft pick of this whole rebuild, Damon Kelso, along with Mike Seibel and Hagen Smith. If you remember, we got absolutely shelled on last year's opening day, so we could really use a change in our fortune, and Colson Montgomery starts the season strong. The first homer of the year is hit by a budding superstar, and I cannot wait to see what he can do in his second full year of starting, as we're now in the 5th inning, and Jordan Diaz gives this one a ride. tied. Our second 2-run shot of the day extends our lead, but the Guardians are coming right back as we are forced to pull Drew Thorpe, but thankfully Marinaccio gets us out of it. Now in the 6th inning, here is newcomer Luis Arraez, who I'm very excited about for his ability to put the barrel on the ball. And so far in the rebuild, we have not had a player with that skill set as the Guardians take the lead. We were once leading by 3 runs, but that did not matter in the end as our bullpen could not survive, as we once again lost on opening day along with the entire series. We once again have a very tough start to the season as we're already forced to take on several division rivals. As I mentioned in the offseason, every single team in our division except for us made the playoffs, while the Twins also won the World Series. So if we want to finally become a contender, we can start by beating these teams. We're in extra innings against the 2nd place Detroit Tigers, and just like opening day, this one's very competitive, but Cherubio missed. The timing on the fastball could not have been better, so instead of tying it, we drop another close game to a division rival. That is very discouraging, but at least we're gonna win the next one. And as far as scouting goes, our draft pick is not nearly as high, so of course there's gonna be a generational player. It almost feels like the game's trolling me at this point, the way that they just sandwiched 2 generational prospects in between the year that I had the #1 overall pick. And of course, along with Randy, there's also this 3rd baseman, JJ Russ, that I really like. Outside of first base, our infield is definitely a need for us in this draft since these classes haven't really featured a lot of good ones, so I'm going to start the year by scouting 23-year-old 2nd baseman Freddie Farrell. If we do end up taking him, I don't even care if he has low 80s potential just because of how bad the other 2nd basemen have been so far, as in the entire rebuild, I've only drafted 1 so far, and that was last year. We would win that series against the Tigers and then go on a big win streak by sweeping the Athletics, and we're looking to keep that streak alive after breaking a 0-0 tie against Washington. We could also add another run as the bases are loaded for Arraez, but never mind, as we do the worst thing possible and need Clemente to save us. He became the first draft pick of the rebuild to make his debut last season, and while it was not impressive, he showed enough to earn the job again this year, and up to this point, he is not disappointed. The former 6th rounder could be the final piece of our bullpen, as he's making quick work of this lineup, and there we go, that is save number 7. That is Chicago's 7th victory in a row, and 3 of their 4 losses came in that first sweep against Cleveland. Back to scouting, Freddie Farrell is the exact type of player we were hoping for, with a high floor and a high ceiling at 23 years old, and I'm really glad we found him because the rest of the 2nd base class is complete garbage. Once again, this seems like a very strong corner outfield class, which is unfortunate given that I drafted 2 of them last year, including one with the #1 pick, but of course I need more options for my first rounder, and these guys look like they could be something. Our win streak continues as Drew Thorpe is now going to give them the business, so it seems we're in pretty good shape as we win the next 2 against Detroit and finish the series with a sweep. I don't know where this team has come from, but they've won 15 out of their last 16, and while it's certainly too early to tell, it seems Luis Arraez has emerged as a legitimate MVP candidate. It also seems Colson Montgomery is finally having the type of breakout year we've been hoping for from any of our young players. And then in the rotation, Tyler Alexander has gone 20 innings without giving up a single run, while Casey Mize's reclamation project's off to a great start. I know at some point there has to be some sort of losing skid, but right now we're refusing to let that happen, winning not 1, but 2 close games against Boston. In this first game in particular, we were trailing by 1 run before Stone Garrett walked it off with a nuke, so it seems the Chicago White Sox have finally arrived and they are not slowing down. Now I'm curious if this is just a phase or if this is when we finally put all the pieces together and become a contender, as we just won another close game, but with the Guardians right on our tail, we cannot afford to slow down. We're in another big series against the defending champs, and just like every game we play against them, this one is way too close. The tying run is on first base, but right on cue, they hit into a game-ending double play, and because our regular closer was tired, Porter Hodge came in and saved the game. That victory secures our 2nd series sweep in a row, so it seems we're on a roll, except we have to take on Luis Rober's Baltimore Orioles, who beat us twice. Suddenly, the Guardians are just 2.5 games back from first place, and coincidentally, they're also our next opponent, so the division lead is very much on the line. It's been a while since I've drafted a catcher, so I'd really like to get another developmental option in, especially because at this point, we're probably just a few weeks away from bringing up Damon Kelso. Even though we have Corey Lee and Kyle Teal, I think we could carry all 3 of them on the roster just because of their positional flexibility. And looking at the stats, that that might just be what we have to do because both of them are playing very solid so far. As for the rest of the team, not only is Luis Arraez going for a batting title, but he's also showing off a ton of power this year. So honestly, when all is said and done, this could go down as one of the greatest free agent signings of all time. After him, Colson Montgomery has slowed down just a little bit, but his numbers are still pretty good, especially for a shortstop. But without a doubt, our true breakout star this season is Alex Kirilloff, who's nearly hitting 300 and also leads the team in RBIs. Those are excellent numbers, while it's also great to see Gavin Sheets return to form, with Jordan Diaz also playing a key role on our offense, along with Spencer Horwitz, who I have not talked about since I traded for him. I really wanted a slugging middle infielder this offseason, and I think Horwitz perfectly fits that bill, as he can mash against righties, but also plays pretty good defense. Of course though, when you're winning this many games, your pitching has to be rock solid, and ours has been that and then much more, as Tyler Alexander has been a stud coming out of the bullpen. He is already at 58 innings, but still has an ERA under 1. And I'm telling you guys, if you want a good pitching staff, find a guy with a high walks per 9, plug him into that long reliever role, and let them cook. Then for the actual rotation, it has been a breakout season for Davy Garcia, who actually is a Cy Young candidate, as he has not lost a game, along with Drew Thorpe, who has slightly worse stats at this point. I am very curious to see just how long his Cy Young campaign lasts, but of course, I really hope he stays in it long term, along with these other guys that are in the running, because we have not won major awards yet. This series against Cleveland is the closest thing we're going to get to the playoffs before the actual playoffs, and if we lose this final game of the series, our division lead is gone. It is time for Colson to show us he's the future, but he strikes out, so Gavin Sheets is our last chance to not strand these runners, and he will not fail us, launching a double into the left center gap. We strike first with 2 runs, and now Kyle Teal goes deep on the very next at bat, so in just 2 swings, we have a 4-0 lead. There was no way Cleveland was coming back after that, as we take the W, and the rest of the month only saw our division lead grow larger. However, now it's time for a series against Kansas City, and they sweep us, so I'm definitely a little bit concerned we're gonna lose our magic, especially now that the Guardians are catching up. We just tied up this game against the Phillies, and Jordan Diaz is looking for more, but that drifts outside. He was so close to adding another dinger to his impressive year, but he was unable to make it happen, so we might be going to extra innings. However, we are the home team, so we have a chance to walk it off, and right on cue, Spencer Horwitz is gonna end this game in one huge swing to right field. That is a signature win to give us our confidence back at just the right time, as we are now 3 games above the Guardians, looking for many more. I am not finding nearly as many gems as I usually do in these draft classes, and while there are still many more guys to look into, I have to say the overall class is looking pretty weak. This may be the most boring draft we've done so far, since there's a generational player we have 0 shot at, and with our first selection, I'm either taking a 23-year-old second baseman or another corner outfielder. Also, this may be the best closing pitcher class I've ever seen in my entire life, so I'm just gonna throw all these guys on my board, and after that, I guess we're kinda just gonna go best player available until there's nobody left to take. To no one's surprise, Randy Matthews is not getting past first overall, but then immediately after that, my favorite target, Freddie Farrell, went off the board. All I need is for Oakland to not pick one of the outfielders that I want, and that's exactly what they did. New York, please don't screw me. 1 second left on the clock. I swear to God, you've got to be kidding me. All 3 of my targets are off the board. This draft was truly cursed from the start, and while I did not expect this to happen, I did prepare for it and scout Aiden Gowdy, who might be slightly worse than those 3 guys. I'm just gonna go for it. That is a tough break, especially as my favorite discovery pitcher goes in the top 10, which doesn't happen very often. So honestly, at this point, I'm just gonna sim to our next selection and hope that a good option is on the board. Thankfully, there are still plenty of closing pitchers on the board, and I think they're all gonna be good, but especially Brian Cisneros, who I'm surprised is still here. That is a no-brainer selection. From my experience, these closers are all gonna be pretty good and usually start getting taken around competitive balance round A. And now in round 2, a lot of my options are gone, but I'm not gonna overthink it and go for a starting pitcher. Like I said, we are playing to our board for the rest of the way, even though some of my selections are gone, but Casey Hughes is still on the board, and we have a solid center fielder. Honestly, this draft did not fall the way that I wanted it to, but sometimes that just happens. And to be fair, this was an extremely weak class, so I'm kinda just done with it and want to move on to the next adventure. We are already up to 66 wins at the All-Star break, which puts us 4.5 2.5 games in first place. And before this year, our best win total was 71, which I think says all that you need to know about the performance of this team. We have turned around faster than just about any team in baseball, and a huge reason for that is the sudden breakout of players who were on last year's team but just didn't make as much of an impact. I've already talked about Alex Kirilloff quite a bit, but apparently Dominic Fletcher also falls into that category, along with Stone Garrett, while even younger talent like Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teal, and Corey Lee have also improved their game pretty steadily. By the way, we did not get Jake Bauers in free agency, so my backup plan was Griffin Conine, and so far he's put up above 800 OPS, so all is good. But we cannot talk about offseason additions without discussing Luis Arraez and Spencer Horwitz. Arraez was signed to a 4-year, $22 million contract just to come in and hit .321 in his first season, but this year he is not just a contact hitter and is on pace to put up a career high in RBIs. Honestly, when I traded our 5-starter for Spencer Horwitz, I really thought I was just adding a bench bat with a bit of power and positional flexibility, but that could not have been further from the truth, as he has emerged as a true offensive weapon. We have gone from a bottom 5 offense to a top 5 offense in virtually every metric, and on top of that, our pitching rotation has the best ERA. We may not have a Cy Young finalist anymore, but you could honestly make that case for pretty much any guy on this roster, as Tyler Alexander is putting up amazing numbers as the first guy out of the bullpen, while Noah Schultz is enjoying a much better second full season, while Davy Garcia and Drew Thorpe continue to shine. If there's any player that wins an award this year, it may be our closer Ben Clemente, who's entering his second year in the league, but he has truly broken out as one of the best bullpen arms in all of baseball, posting an ERA under 2 and a WHIP under 1. Looking at All-Star voting though, Tyler Alexander gets the nod over any of our starters, while Ben Clemente is the #1 closer. So already in the first couple menus, we are seeing so much representation, but unfortunately, I am not seeing anybody else. I would have thought that Alex Kirilloff for sure would have made it into the All-Star game with these numbers, but unfortunately, he gets snubbed. So we're moving on to the second half of the year, starting with a pair of tough series. It is always so difficult to rebuild momentum after the break, but we already have an extra innings game against the Dodgers, and our new best player, Luis Arraez, just tied it up and kept it going. Now I'm really counting on our bullpen to not throw this in the trash, as we just walked Bellinger and Lux, but Ohtani grounds out. So now we can secure this win as Colson Montgomery pulls this into right field, Betts going all the way back to the track and hauls it in. I was really hoping that would be the walk-off, but at least now all Gavin Sheets needs to do is hit this one as far as he can. He's already celebrating, and that is a big signature win to start the second half. We may have lost the series to Detroit, but we follow up by sweeping the Dodgers. And because I'm feeling good and generous, I'm going to go ahead and sign one of our favorite reclamation projects to an extension. It was definitely a rough couple years for Alex Kirilloff, but he finally put all the pieces together, and we're going to reward him for it. And considering that we revived his career, I'm sure he has no problem signing this extension. It is certainly an exciting time to be a Chicago White Sox fan, and because we're a winning team, I think it's finally time to be buyers at the deadline. This is going to be a great time, but my biggest rule is I can't make any deals with teams in my division, so even though someone like Josh Lowe would be a very fun addition to this team, the Twins have him, so I can't do it. However, what I can do is make a move for a dynamic utility man named Otto Lopez, who is hitting the cover off the ball this season, and because he's on the Marlins, they're trying to sell him for whatever they can get. Obviously, the return doesn't need to be crazy, but for them to want to do this, we need to give them something worthwhile, and at least in my opinion, the player that makes the most sense to throw in is Edgar Cuero, who they're certainly interested in and will probably never play for the White Sox because of the players in front of him. I'm going to pull the trigger and make this move, but since I was just talking about a catcher, I think it's finally time to bring up Damon Kelso to the 40-man and then to the MLB. With the combination of Otto Lopez, Luis Arraez, and Spencer Horwitz alongside Colson Montgomery at short, our middle infield is completely loaded, and because of this, I think we don't have much of a need for Corey Julks anymore, who has had some pretty good seasons here in Chicago as a platoon. I'm going to send him across town to the Cubs in exchange for a brand new catching prospect, and while I wanted to make my last move the call-up of Hagen Smith, he's on a cold streak, and I honestly don't know who I would take out of the rotation. There's no doubt in my mind that we have the most dangerous young lineup in baseball, and the scariest part about it is I think there is a lot more room for improvement, especially since Damon Kelso hasn't even taken an at-bat yet. He has loaded bases in his first career series against Milwaukee as we're down 1 trying to earn the sweep, but he flies out. So we are still trailing in the 9th inning as ball 4 to Lopez barely missed the plate. That one probably could have been called either way, but we still have to score the runner, and it is do or die for Stone Garrett, who completely whiffed. Now it's a full count with 2 outs, and thankfully he walks. So now it's time for Alex Kirilloff to go ahead and make his money. He was late on the first fastball, but he pulls this one, and that is going all the way into foul grounds, being chased down, and it is caught. We lost that game, and it would have been so cool to see Kelso hit a grand slam. But even though we didn't earn the sweep, we competed until the very end, and this lineup clearly has a lot of potential. We're going to need their best performances in these next 2 series against Detroit and Minnesota, and starting with the Tigers, we get the sweep. That was a revenge 8-inning gem by former Tiger Casey Mize, as we also scored 6 runs, and we're looking to continue our winning ways against the defending champion Twins. A 2-run 7th inning won us the first game, and anytime I get a chance to hit with the bases loaded, I'm going to jump into that game just about every single time and put up some RBIs. Another series victory gives us a 6.5 game lead in our division, and because it's the beginning of August, it is now time to look at our new draft class, which may or may not be okay. I'm at least feeling decent about our first pick, which was a 3rd baseman, and considering that he's above 70 overall and 90 potential, I will certainly take it. Not that there aren't other important things, but I cannot believe that every single player here still has blue potential after what we went through. But to be fair, looking at the class after our first 3 picks, these guys are all very raw. If potential is the only thing you're looking for, it is actually pretty easy to find in the draft, but it's also very much worth noting that many of the guys that I draft never reach the majors because they're simply too raw, which is certainly a trade-off. Just like in previous drafts, we're gonna see what the future holds for guys like Pedro Duarte and Vance Chaney, who are 47 and 48 overall. But for this class, I really want to focus at the top, where we started out by taking Aiden Gowdy because all of our options were gone. Thankfully for us, it still worked out much better than it could have, but just to add some perspective, John Vega ended up being 94 potential, while my personal favorite of the 3 options, Freddie Farrell, is a great contact hitting second baseman. Of course, Randy Matthews was a generational 82 overall player, while Boone Caraballo was a 91 potential 69 overall. So all things considered, I'm actually just as happy with Aiden Gowdy as I would have been with any of those other options. Then with our second selection, I felt no choice but to take one of the better closing prospects I've ever seen, as Brian Cisneros already comes in at 75 overall with plenty of room to grow further. As I've said before, closers in this game are just made way too overpowered, so it's kind of a no-brainer every single time. But then with our third selection, we went back to starting pitcher and took Darius Monacelli. That wasn't our best class of the series, but I'm really hoping that it can add to a farm system that already has 25 top 100 players in it, and considering that we've already drafted most of the guys that are going to play on our team in this video, I think I'm going to focus a little less on scouting from here on out. It seems we're on a fast track to the playoffs, but there are still 2 months left in the season, and we're in a very close game against the Atlanta Braves. The Braves are an electric team, so it is great to see that we've only held them to 1 run, and now we have runners at the corner, so our new addition, Otto Lopez, has a chance to win it right here, which is exactly what he's gonna do. Chicago is not slowing down after a hot start to the second half, and at 90 wins, we are 9.5 games above the Guardians. We have the best record in all of Major League Baseball by several games, and I'm very excited about the playoffs, because at least from looking at our roster, it seems our best baseball is still in front of us. We are nearly locked into a playoff spot, so I think 105 to 110 wins is very possible, but right now we're locked into an extra inning game against the Royals, which we are going to win. I have no idea when we're officially going to clinch the playoffs, but I cannot imagine we're far away, especially as we continue to win way more games than we're losing. At the start of September, we are sitting at 97 wins, and sure enough, from checking out the standings, we have secured a playoff spot. Now that we're in the playoffs, I really don't think there's much else to do but sim to the end of the year, and we would finish with 109 wins, which was the best record in all of baseball. This elite season was certainly unexpected, especially considering we only won 70 games last year, but our offense took a big step forward, and I think that's a huge reason that we're here. Alongside the development of our young guys like Alex Kirilloff and Colson Montgomery, signing Luis Arraez is proving to be one of the best decisions we could have made, and now that I'm actually looking at it, other moves like signing Griffin Conine and trading for Otto Lopez and Spencer Horwitz are big deals as well. well. We had a total of 8 guys finish with an OPS of 800 and higher, which is a huge deal because in the past years of this rebuild, I really don't know how many we had. Then of course, our pitching rotation was also a major strength of our team, as Noah Schultz just had his best full season ever, while Drew Thorpe had another solid year. Then our bullpen was also very consistent, with Rob Marinaccio putting up a pretty solid stat line given that he pitched the most innings. While this was also a great bounce back season for Jose Hernandez, along with Ben Clemente, who was outstanding. He was leading for reliever of the year for most of the season, but at the last moment, Drew Rasmussen swooped in and stole it. So that is a bit unfortunate considering he had 54 saves, but nobody else on the team won their awards either. We're going to be tested in our first playoff series of the video, going up against the Texas Rangers, who are a loaded team, and they signed a player that we are very familiar with in Tariq Skubal. This needs to be Drew Thorpe's best game because he's competing against a legitimate ace-level player, and while he did give up the first run of the game, it's only 1-0 in the fourth. However, we do have the tying run on third base, so we have to deliver a big play, but they strike us out. I also just realized that Skubal isn't even the pitcher they have on the mound in game 1, which is kind of embarrassing, because all that means is we're getting beat by Texas's number 3 guy. We were a great team this season, but right now it seems that the Rangers are overwhelming us with more experienced talent, so we are already off to a bad start. To make things even worse, they're putting in Tariq Skubal, but we start off with a 2-run bomb, so things are going much better than I expected so far, but Schultz allows them to tie it up. Every time one of the teams has scored, the other has answered, as we're once again tied up, which will lead us to a very intense 9th inning where we just forced a double play. Without a doubt, this is a must-win game, but we're going to send it to extra innings, so I am very nervous because if we lose, we're going to be facing elimination. They just went deep off of our best reliever, and now we're facing the guy who beat him out for reliever of the year, and there's already 1 out on the board, but they did hit us. There's still hope as we have the tying run on first base, but Stone Garrett did the one thing he could not afford to do, so we lost a real heartbreaker. We are in danger of being swept after being the best team in all of baseball, but this sac fly gets us on the board, so I'm really hoping that gives us a little momentum on offense, but immediately it is gone. Our pitching staff has let us down all series long, and this game really seems to be no different, even though we did just tie it up. So it's now up to Davy Garcia to lock in, and right as I say that, he gives up a solo shot. There's no doubt in my mind that Texas is the better team, and Garcia's 6 runs have put us in real trouble. Thankfully though, it does seem our offense is not giving up yet, as we have loaded the bases in the 6th inning, and I do not think Alex Kirilloff is gonna have enough speed to tag up here, but he's gonna go for it anyways. This is not a good decision. The throw comes in on time. That is such a frustrating way to end an otherwise very good season, as the Texas Rangers did not just beat us, but they stuffed us into a locker. This is certainly a painful introduction to the postseason, but it goes to show October is a different world. On the bright side though, I think we're still very much ahead of schedule on this rebuild after winning 109 games, and we finally have a young core that I feel confident in, with many more talented players on the way up. Gavin Sheets is the only pending free agent we have, and at 31 years old, I think I'm just gonna let him test the market, especially because Mike Seibel's definitely ready to fill his role, and he does pretty much everything better. I really wanted to offer Drew Thorpe a 4-year contract extension, but this number obviously is not very realistic, and I have a feeling that a talent this good on the White Sox would definitely be represented by Scott Boras, and there is no way he's not gonna test free agency. I don't think we have to do very much in free agency, but I do really like Will Vest and think he would add great value to the squad, but I think the huge advantage to picking him up is that he was a former Detroit Tiger, so we can weaken them while strengthening us. As far as our offense goes though, I'm really struggling to find any weaknesses since we are bringing up Mike Seibel to fill in at first base, and just from looking at the stats of our regular contributors, pretty much everybody put up an OPS above 800, so there's really nowhere that we can upgrade. Coming into season number 5, our lineup has only improved on paper with the addition of Mike Seibel and with Damon Kelso continuing to develop, so there is no reason to expect us not to have another great season. Just as our team continues to get better, so does our farm system, as we have 21 guys in the top 100, and at some point this season, there may be some guys ready to make their MLB debuts. Opening day is once again against a division rival, but they're off to a great start, as they delivered a 3-run bomb in the first inning, so we are already playing from behind, but this is certainly gonna help. There's a huge double for Alex Kirilloff, who would then get scored by Stone Garrett on an RBI single, so we are once again tied up, at least until Drew Thorpe gives up the lead. This game continues to go back and forth as we have our 3rd lead change of the day, and with the way Minnesota started off, I thought they would run away with this, but guys like Alex Kirilloff stuff did not let it happen. That home run puts him at 4 for 4 on the day, as the White Sox offense had a very successful debut. Sweeping a team in our division is a great start, and now we're up against the Tigers, and after this intentional walk, we have the bases loaded. All we need is one run, but immediately Stone Garrett hits into a double play. That very unfortunate break gives us our first loss of the year, and this should be another competitive year against the Guardians. We're facing them later this month, so we do need to keep winning, and checking out their squad, the Guardians are even better than I imagined with so many 90+ overalls. We won 109 games last season, but this Guardians team still won 100, so without a doubt, they are our biggest competition, and in game 1 of the series have a 2-0 lead. That was a double for former first-round pick Damon Kelso, who is playing his first full season of ball, and he's a very new important addition to this young core as we're trying to win the division. We just got shut out in game number 1, but we do win game 2, and now game 3 is in extra innings. After 2 decisive victories, this is the closest game we've had yet, and the rookie Mike Seibel will win it. That is a signature victory against our top rival, so now we have a chance to win this series, which we do. It also seems that series win completely ruined Cleveland's momentum, as we are winning the division by 16.5 games at the start of June, even though it seems our offense has not been as dynamic as last year. It certainly helps that Damon Kelso has a 799 OPS, while Colson Montgomery's near 850, but after being top 5 in runs last year, we have fallen down to 6. However, any regression on our offense has been more than made up for by our elite pitching rotation, as it seems Noah Schultz has finally emerged as a legitimate number 2 guy. Along with that, Casey Mize and Jonathan Cannon are both having excellent years, while Davy Garcia is the worst, but not by much. It has also been another great year for Ben Clemente, who so far has 25 saves and an ERA near 1, so just from playing more games, our young core is developing even further and getting closer and closer to their true potential. Our pitching staff is putting us in position to be perhaps one of the best teams in MLB history, but of course we still have a lot of season to go, and now in this game, the Royals made it very interesting, taking the lead. It seems they have all the momentum in the world, especially after scoring again, so they rallied with 4 unanswered runs to steal a victory, and now we're taking on Cleveland once again. Winning the series would give us a ton of confidence going into the break, but just like so many games against Cleveland, this is going to be close. Ben Clemente has a very tough job right now, and of course, he's up for the challenge, leading the league in saves. He strikes out his first and his second batter, so there's just one more to go as that bunt is popped up straight into the glove of Clemente. Chicago secures another series win over Cleveland, and that can be a great confidence boost heading into the All-Star break. As I mentioned earlier, I am not going to focus on the draft nearly as much this season, but there are so many good prospects, especially pitchers at the top. We could really use a high floor pitching prospect, and Domingo Guzman certainly checks that box for us, as our Discovery Scouts did a great job uncovering the #1 player in the class. It is very rare for Discovery pitchers to go in the first round, but apparently not impossible, because here's Travis Robinson at number 3. However, my second favorite selection, Kevin Barreto, goes 2 picks before us, so I'm gonna wait out on Guzman and take Vince Pryor. We just got our 7th favorite prospect in the draft at pick 26, and my board is completely decimated. I didn't focus nearly as much on scouting this year, but as you can see, this position player class is not looking too hot, so I think I'm just gonna go for a guaranteed high potential guy and just hope and pray that he works out. That's gonna be the strategy for a lot of these guys. For our 3rd selection, these same 5 guys are all still on the board, so once again, we are going with the same strategy, and why not Jason Hooley? Let's pull the trigger. I don't really think it matters who I draft at this point in the series, but we're still trying to do at least okay in the draft, and considering that Domingo Guzman is still on the board in round 5, I think we're doing a pretty good job. I'm taking him right here. That was definitely the least organized draft we've ever had, but of course, they're not always going to be perfect, since this is MLB The Show, and while most of this is trusting my scouts along with my own experiences playing this game, not every draft is going to be a home run. At the deadline, we are 71-26, and even though it seemed the Guardians were gunning for a title in the first month of the season, they have certainly slowed down, while we absolutely have not. A big factor in that is it does seem our offense is playing at a very high level, as we finally get a full year of Otto Lopez, who's been nothing short of a star, along with Damon Kelso, who may be on a cold streak coming into the break, but he has been outstanding. Then of course there's our starting pitching rotation, which I have no doubt has the best ERA in all of baseball, as Noah Schultz has actually become our ace this season, passing up Drew Thorpe in both overall and performance. Thorpe has still been very good though, along with last year's All-Star Tyler Alexander, while Casey Mize, Jonathan Cannon, and Davy Garcia always seem to perform at a pretty respectable level. Noah Schultz and Drew Thorpe both made the All-Star game, which I think is something that many White Sox fans are counting for in the future in real life. And of course, scrolling over to closer, Ben Clemente is the starter. That is very well deserved, and as you can see, the last player to make it is Otto Lopez. All I can say about him is this was an incredible trade to go out and make with Miami, as he has been nothing but spectacular ever since he got here and has so much versatility. Just like any contender should do, I'm looking for any moves that make sense at the deadline, and while bringing back Luis Robert Jr. could be a fun move, I don't think it really makes sense given where this team is right now. However, we did make a trade with the Marlins last year, and they have another intriguing player on the block in Roman Anthony, who's playing pretty solid at 23 years old. However, as I continue to throw in prospects, this is going to be pretty expensive, and it wouldn't be that much of an upgrade over what we already have. It was very tempting to pull the trigger anyways, but I decided not to make any moves at this deadline, and now it's time to check out our MLB draft. Obviously, I am very nervous considering I did not do a lot of scouting, but it looks like we're not going to get hurt that badly. We started and ended this draft with pitchers, as Domingo Guzman was an absolute gem of a 5th round pick, coming in at 68 overall, and that was even better than our 1st round pick, Vince Pryor, who's still good in his own right. Then for the position players, we went for guaranteed high potential players, and as you can see, Jason Ryan was truly a diamond in the rough, as he is a switch hitting power guy with plenty of positional versatility. He has 95 potential, while Jason Hooley and Ken Bender have 91 and 88 respectively, so just by trusting our scouts with guys that had pretty promising potential ranges, we were able to make something out of nothing and actually turn together a pretty solid draft with the exception of a couple guys. Unless something goes terribly wrong, I'm just going to simulate the rest of this season since we've already won so much, and at the start of September, we already have 100 wins and would finish the regular season with 112. By improving our team from last year, we also improved our win record, and while first baseman Mike Seibel was the only new addition on the team, he was a huge upgrade over Gavin Sheets and helped improve our offense. However, the biggest development this season was the continued improvement of our pitching rotation, as Drew Mize is very close to reaching his true potential. Then of course, Drew Thorpe and Noah Schultz were good once again, but I think the bigger concern here is that Jonathan Cannon really fell off late in the year. Even then, a 4.25 ERA is solid for a 5-starter, and if that's the biggest thing we have to complain about this season, it just shows how dominant we were in every stretch of the game. We have our first award winner, and it certainly is not who I thought it was, as Deivi Garcia takes home the Cy Young. This really could have gone to any of our starters, including Casey Mize, who I thought would win it, but instead, he's not even on the list, and it's Noah Schultz who's the runner-up. The selection process for this one has always been interesting to me, but moving on to reliever of the year, where Ben Clemente won it. Last year, he lost out to Drew Rasmussen, but he put together another season that was nearly identical to last season on an almost scary level, and this time he took home what was rightfully his. He's definitely emerged as the best pitcher in the entire game, but now moving on to rookie of the year, I already mentioned Mike Seibel, and he is the rightful winner of this one. He has improved so much at 25 years old, and on top of that, his potential is still sky high, so considering we got him in like the 3rd round, I'm very excited about his future. Now it is time for the playoffs, where we're taking on a familiar face, as the Guardians have emerged as our biggest rival in the series, and even though we had their number this season, they are still very talented, and we have to be careful. I'm a bit scared because our pitching rotation really let us down last year, but we start out strong, and on top of that, Drew Thorpe is holding it down at least until the 4th inning. There goes our lead, but Stone Garrett gives it right back, so it seems we have a crazy game on our hands as Griffin Coney nearly scored another. Runners are at the corners for our rookie of the year, and Mike Seibel finishes the job, giving us back our lead. We are looking to start the playoffs so strong, and Colson Montgomery adds another run with this dribbling single up the middle, as we would shut out the Guardians the rest of the way for a win. That was a great way to start, but I'm still concerned about this rotation, as there's 3 runs, but we are going to get 2 back, and there's a chance to add more in the 2nd. Here's a full count for Colson Montgomery, but he's gonna walk, so the bases are loaded with 2 outs, but Luis Ariz drives in 2 to give us the lead. The Guardians certainly have their backs against the wall, especially since we're starting Deivi Garcia, the Cy Young winner, on the mound, and we already have the lead in the 2nd inning. We have a chance to add more runs in the 4th inning, but unfortunately we fly out to left field, so this could be a chance for the Guardians to finally get back in this, but that's not gonna happen, and Colson Montgomery goes deep. We are on our way to sweeping our biggest division rival, but maybe not so fast, as they've scored 3 runs in the past 2 innings and officially tie it. Deivi Garcia held strong through the whole game, but in the end, our bullpen has let us down, so we could very well be heading for extra innings, but we are not done yet. There are 2 runners on for Stone Garrett, who hits into a double play, and why do I feel like that's not the first time he's done that? I feel like there's no one on the team that chokes in bigger situations more often than him, and this rocketing double goes over Seibel's head and gives Cleveland their first victory. Chicago has missed out on the sweep, but they need to bounce back, because if they allow Cleveland to win this game, they're playing in a winner-takes-all Game 5. Unfortunately, they just left the bases loaded, but they come through with a huge triple, and they're very lucky that Casey Mize is holding it down as here comes the offense in the 5th inning. Game number 3 may have gotten away from them, but in the end, Chicago proves that they are the better team and dominates on their way to the ALCS. This was all made possible by a 4 home run performance from their offense as Damon Kelso started it all, so they have plenty of momentum going into the Champion Series against the Red Sox. Just like the Guardians, the Red Sox are extremely talented, although they're lacking a bit more in their starting rotation, which we could take advantage of. But of course, this is a dangerous offense that I'm really not looking forward to facing. We're gonna find out in this series if pitching truly wins championships, but the Red Sox hit a leadoff home run, so they're off to a fast start, but we one-up them. I think we might have a shootout on our hands, especially after we scored another run, but immediately after that, both pitchers locked in. We are in a pretty good spot as Drew Thorpe only gave up 1 run, but we just left 2 runners on base, and now they're cooking. It's gonna be up to our bullpen, but they give up the lead in 1 single inning, so it seems our momentum is completely gone. We are trying very hard to sell this game away in front of our home crowd as we once again leave runners on base, so it is all gonna come down to the bottom of the 9th. There is very little room for error, and Alex Kirilloff starts us off strong, so it's very encouraging to see a runner on base, but right on cue, Seibel blows it. We have lost another playoff game by grounding into a double play, and considering how well Drew Thorpe played, this one really hurts. After what seemed like a sure win, we are playing from behind with Noah Schultz on the mound, but lately our biggest issue has been leaving runners on base, so Stone Garrett's trying to change that, and that is exactly what he does. We start things off with a 3-run shot to left center, so I'm feeling very confident, but just like last game, they have a big inning. Just like that, they have taken the lead with back-to-back home runs, but fortunately, we're able to tie it pretty quickly. But regardless, I still cannot believe that Cy Young runner-up Noah Schultz even put us in this position. There are runners at the corners for Damon Kelso, who gets a breaking ball right down the middle, and there is no chance he is letting that one by him. That is a 3-run shot into the parking lot as we give the Red Sox a taste of their own medicine, but they are not done. This one has been nothing short of an absolute classic as Boston ties it up, so we are once again counting on our offense to answer as they have done all game long, and this time's no different. There's 1 run to give us the lead, and a single from Spencer Horwitz is going to add 2 more, and even though Schultz did not perform, our offense made up for it, so we secure a very important victory. That was the offensive rally we've been waiting on, but Game 3 is much closer as we broke a 5th inning tie, and now it's up to our bullpen. Van Clemente's looking to close out a 1-run victory, and the best closer in baseball does exactly that with a nasty splitter, so we've officially taken the series lead. If we can win our 3rd game in a row, I'm very confident about winning this series as we do take the lead in the 8th, and we would hold on for our 3rd victory in a row. One more victory can punch our ticket to the World Series, and in a 1-1 tie, Damon Kelso sends this to the top of the Green Monster. We have not seen our young star catcher perform very much on screen, but he is dominating in the postseason. Also, I'm feeling very good with Drew Thorpe on the mound, as he did not give them a single chance to get back in this one, so we have punched our ticket to the World Series. I'm sure just like all of you, I was very nervous after that first game, but we went on to win 4 in a row and become American League champs in dominant fashion. We're going to be taking on the Milwaukee Brewers in the big game, and they've been a great team the past couple seasons, but the scariest thing about them is unlike the Red Sox, they actually have a very good pitching rotation that might even be on par with ours. Of course, after actually looking at our rotation, I think we have them beat, but it's still the best we've played through the entire postseason. But they also have so much youth in their lineup, which makes them very terrifying. These teams are as evenly matched as it gets, so this might be a huge challenge for us. And to no one's surprise, it is 0-0 in the 3rd. We just stranded 2 runners, and immediately they're gonna score as Drew Thorpe gets shelled in Game 1, and that quickly turned very ugly. That was not the start we were looking for, and they're already up 1-0 in the 1st inning, so we desperately need to come through with runners at the corners, and that is a great play at 2nd. I'm afraid that our offense has stalled out, but there's a dinger, so Mike Seibel bails us out again, but it is not over. Our bullpen lets them tie the game and then completely falls apart, so the Brewers are already up 2-0, 4-0. I'm starting to worry that despite finishing with 112 wins, we are not good enough to be the World Series champion, but here's 2 runs to start out Game 3, and while that is a comfortable lead, our foot needs to stay on the gas because it can disappear in seconds. A solo homer definitely helps us out, but also the Cy Young winner Davy Garcia has only given up 1 total hit. A sacrifice fly will make it 4-0, while Colson Montgomery bats in another run, so we're in very good shape, especially if we can keep this rally going, and Luis Ariz is gonna clear the bases. Our offense finally broke through, even though our bullpen nearly blew that for us, but regardless, we got a very needed first win, and we start out this one very strong. We might finally be back as there's another run, as we have stormed back to tie the series. It is very likely that the winner of Game 5 wins the entire World Series, but we are off to a rough start, as Drew Thorpe gives up 2 runs, and we're facing off against Pablo Lopez. In the 7th inning, we are trailing by 1 run, but this blooper is gonna get down, so we desperately need our young catcher Damon Kelso to step up, but he can't do it. That is the 3rd time he's left runners on base during the World Series, but there's a home run, so we are back in business, but not for long. Are you kidding me? That's an unfortunate way to end it, as we're now facing elimination, and I have no idea what happened to our bullpen, but they need to get it together or else we're gonna lose the World Series. We are fighting for our life as this game is tied at 0 apiece, but as we always seem to do, we strand runners on base and it is still scoreless. It is very likely we're headed to extra innings as Kelso sends this one into the right center gap, but Churrio's gonna have no problem tracking it down. But at least the good news for us is our pitching is buying us a lot of time by playing great. Alex Kirilloff gets on first after hitting a bullet, but the rest of our offense lets him down. And considering that our bullpen has not been great so far this series, I am a bit nervous. We cannot allow them to score the go-ahead run, and there's a strikeout, so it is still 0-0 heading into the 11th where we can walk it off. We have a man on first base, but Colson Montgomery immediately grounds into a double play, which is definitely our specialty, as it seems every time we make good contact, it just doesn't go our way. Just a reminder that we're going through all this stress just to force an elimination takes all Game 7, and as far as stress goes, that would be the peak of the mountain as it is the 15th inning. Honestly, at this point, I'm just amazed that it's 0-0, because even when they've lost, Milwaukee has eaten our bullpen for lunch. I cannot remember the last time I played a game that lasted this long, but we have 2 aboard, and our best hitter, Stone Garrett, is at the plate, but we blow it again. At this point, I would rather lose the World Series than continue this game another inning, as this has lasted double the length it was supposed to, and we're going to the 19th. Now, I know you guys can't see it, but I am this close to having a mental breakdown because our team cannot hit the ball, but finally, right when I'm starting to lose it, Stone Garrett sends us to Game 7. Thank freaking God. I have never been more excited for a walk-off home run in my entire life, as that was the only run scored of the entire game, and all I'm gonna say is we better win game number 7. Obviously, these rebuilds are about the players, but if I went 19 innings just to lose in Game 7, I'm gonna need a couple business days to recover, so thankfully, we come up with 2 homers in the 3rd. This is a good position to be in, although our bullpen is making me very nervous, but we strike with a home run in the 8th, but after giving up an instant home run in the 9th inning, Ben Clemente gives up a 2-run shot. There is no way. Going back to extra innings might truly be worse than losing the World Series, and I'm still trying to process how we choked a 3-run lead in the 9th inning. We were 2 outs away from holding up the trophy, and now we hit into a double play, and once again, 9 innings is not enough. To make matters worse, Porter Hodge is trying very hard to choke this away, but thankfully this chopper gets us out of it. But after what happened in the 9th inning, we're gonna need to end this fast. If there's anybody I want in this position, it is Mike Seibel, and right on cue, that no-doubter is not coming back, and we walk off the World Series. What a comeback for the Chicago White Sox, as I think that is the perfect way to put a bow on this rebuild, and for a team built around its young players, one of their most promising is able to take them to the promised land. This was a heck of a video to film, so I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do like MLB The Show and you want to see more of my content, be sure to like and subscribe since it really helps, and also click right here to watch more.